All right. Okay, well, thank you all for coming out to the March 27th meeting of the Board of Supervisors. We're going to get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Couple announcements. Montgomery Township will participate in the Autism Acceptance and Awareness Day event this Sunday, April 2nd, from 12 to 3 at the Montgomery Mall, lower level in the Macy's Court. The inclusive activities include a magic show, crafts, rock painting, balloon twisting, interactive book reading, and a sensory room. There will also be helpful resources and raffles to benefit the Eagles Autism Foundation. I'm sorry, I took that from
That's
you.
okay.
To add whatever you want to add.
No, please come out. It'll be a fun night for everyone. A fun day.
And then public comment. Any persons wishing to make public comment during this meeting on any items not listed on the agenda may do so at this time. Any comments for anything not on the agenda? Okay, thank you. Announcement of executive session, Solicitor Walco.
Yes, there is an executive session before tonight's meeting where 2 personnel matters were discussed related to township personnel.
Thank you. Item number 6 is our consent agenda. I'm going to move to approve the consent agenda as presented for the following: the minutes of the March 13th, 2023 board meeting, payment of bills for March 27th, 2023, escrow release number 2 for the Walnut Knoll 2 lot subdivision.
Second.
Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And then number 7 is our public hearing. I will turn that over to Solicitor Walco.
Thank you very much. At this time, we will adjourn the public meeting and adjourn into this public hearing on the conditional use application of the trustees of the University of Pennsylvania, or the owners and operators of the University of Pennsylvania Health System. This is a conditional use application for 4 FOUR tax parcels located in vacant land on the east side of Route 202 between Gateway Center Drive and Gwynmont Drive in Montgomery Township, which is currently zoned C commercial. The proposal in this application is to develop and operate an ambulatory healthcare center. That use is a permitted use through a conditional use approval pursuant to sections 230.75.A5 and table 230A of the Montgomery Township zoning ordinance. Before we begin this hearing, I have 7 board exhibits I will be marking. Board Exhibit 1 is the conditional use application, which was dated November 10th, 2022. Board Exhibit 2 is the letter from the applicant's attorney dated February 17th, 2023, evidencing a prior extension to hold the hearing on today's application. That, per the letter, was dated December 9th, 2022. An additional extension until April 30th, 2023 to hold this hearing. Board Exhibit 3 is the township's legal notice of March 27th, 2023 hearing, tonight's hearing on this conditional use application. Board Exhibit 4 is the proof of advertisement of that legal notice in the Reporter on March 10th, 2023 and March 17th, 2023. Board Exhibit 5 is the proof of township notices of this hearing to adjacent landowners. I believe 20 adjacent landowners were notified by that letter from the township. Board Exhibit 6 is the voluntary proof of the township notice to the North Penn, Happer, Horsham, and Wissahickon school districts of this hearing and the application. And Board Exhibit 7 will be the text of the applicable conditional use provisions of the zoning code, just for reference. That's sections 230.75A5 and 230.156.2. Believe that the applicant is represented tonight by Greg Davis from Salt Ewing, who is here, and I will turn it over to him in a second. First, at this point in time, I'd also like to see if there's anybody else in the public tonight that is seeking party standing on this application. And let me explain that for a second. Party standing means that you would actually be a party to this application. You do not need to have party standing in order to make comment on the application. The way the hearing will be held is that Mr. Davis will call witnesses in support of his application. This board is sitting in a quasi-judicial capacity to hear the evidence and the testimony presented. At the end of his witnesses being called, there will be an opportunity for anyone who so desires to provide public comment. And again, that public comment can be provided whether or not you want to seek party standing. If you do seek party standing, you will have a right to participate in the hearing beyond public comment and have the opportunity to call your own witnesses or cross-examine the applicant's witnesses. You also will be in a position to file an appeal on any decision if you so desire. But again, you do not need to have party standing if you desire to simply provide public comment on this application. And certainly at the end, the board will have the opportunity in their quasi-judicial capacity to ask any questions to the applicant or the applicant's witnesses that might be prompted by any of your comments. There is a court reporter here tonight. So if you are coming up, I ask that you state your name clearly, that you spell your name for the record. And also, as a result, if there's any references to any documents or maps or exhibits, that we describe it so it comes clearly through the transcript that we know what we're discussing. At this time, I will turn it over to Mr. Davis, the attorney, to present his case at this time. Thank you.
Good evening, folks. Greg Davis.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry, Mr. Davis. So all that being said by party standing, is there anybody in the audience that would like to seek party standing on this application? Hearing and seeing none, and again, we'll have public comment at the end. I'll turn it over to Mr. Davis, and Mr. Davis, maybe to provide this board with a little bit more direction as to what you're going to be presenting tonight, particularly as to what witnesses might be better suited to answer some of the questions for the board. If you could provide a brief overview of what the applicant is seeking and who we expect to be hearing from tonight before we dive into that application.
I'll be happy to do all that. Greg Davis with Saul Ewing. I have some exhibit binders, duplicative of what you'll see on the screen, but if I could pass these out, it might be easier for you. If you see something or hear something and you want to flip back to it, it might make that a little easier.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Additional copies. You sure? Yeah.
And for the record, what is being handed up is a exhibit binder with pre-marked exhibits A1 through A9. I anticipate Mr. Davis will be going through the course of this hearing.
Let me just go through a little bit of the procedural background. We initially submitted our conditional use application in the fall. We then revised our plans and some of our exhibits and resubmitted in January. So we've got 2 rounds of township review letters. We then presented to the Planning Commission in February 16th. We received a unanimous recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission. And with respect to the exhibits, yes, our exhibits will be marked A1 through A9 tonight. A1, just for housekeeping purposes, is our agreement of sale, just establishing our standing to bring this application. A2 is a copy of the conditional use application. It's not all of the contents. It's just the form that was required to be filled out and submitted with the contents of the application. Skipping to A9, those are copies of the township and county review letters. And I'd like to identify those individually if I can very quickly. The first is February 3rd, 23 Gilmore and Associates letter. The second is a January 29, 23 zoning review memo from the zoning officer. The third is a February 3rd, 23 Township Department of Fire Services letter. The fourth is a January 30, 23 Montgomery County Planning Commission letter. And the fifth of those is a December 2nd, 2022 memo from the Montgomery Township Police Department. So in A3, which you'll see projected tonight, is our principal exhibit. It contains slides. They're numbered 1 to 36, and they include everything from a description of the use, site plans, landscape plans, renderings, perspectives, and we'll go through those with the witnesses as they come up. We have 5 witnesses tonight, representative from Penn Medicine, our architect, the civil engineer on the project, the landscape architect on the project, and our traffic engineer. And we intend to establish through their testimony and the exhibits that we meet the specific ordinance requirements for an ambulatory healthcare center. Are there any questions for me before we dive in? 5 sounds like a lot of witnesses, but we'll be quick. We'll touch all the bases, but we'll move.
You can
Okay,
continue.
we'll call our first witness, Teresa Larrabee.
Solemnly swear to the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Could you state your name and please spell for the board?
Teresa Larrabee, TheresaLarivee.
Can you all hear me okay? Okay, that's what I thought. Teresa, what is your job title at Penn Medicine?
I am the Chief Business Officer for Penn Medicine.
And can you describe what your job responsibilities are in that capacity?
Sure. So I am the executive responsible for this project. My other responsibilities, which dovetail with this project, is developing new channels of access for meeting patient needs, examining and challenging current state ambulatory facilities, the financial operational models, and forecasting what the future state will be, and also enhancing system-wide services to deliver operational excellence, growth, innovative investment, entrepreneurial ownership, and high quality.
And in furtherance of this project, Penn Medicine has assembled a team of consultants to help with the design of the facility. Is that right?
That's correct. And several of our team are here this evening, and they'll be testifying in connection with the conditional use application.
Okay. What are Penn Medicine's intentions and goals with respect to this facility? And you can refer to Exhibit A3, page 2, if that's helpful.
That would be great.
Yeah. And we just need.
Pull this up. So as noted on the slide, Penn is seeking to expand patient care and access for the community of Montgomery and Bucks counties by developing a high-quality ambulatory care closer to home. From wellness to evaluation, treatment options, patients that have access to a full spectrum of healthcare services, including current clinical trials, all under one roof. We have certainly found that having care closer to home is really important, and patients do very well, and it also supports their family. In general, this will be all outpatient services. There will be no hospital beds, there will be no overnight stay, and there will not be an emergency room or an emergency department.
Okay, and moving to the next slide, Teresa, can you describe some of the community benefits that Penn Medicine expects the facility will bring with it?
Of course. So on the right-hand side, you can see a map and the proposed location of our facility. And on the left-hand side, you can see the benefits to the community. First and foremost, I've mentioned access, really facilitate convenient access for the greater community of Montgomery County and Bucks County. Experience, really connect with the community to ensure the very best patient experience that's close to home. People, we really hope that members of the community will come and be employees, and they'll be recognizing their neighbors and their friends as we provide these critical services. Quality, establishing standards of care that focus on care, coordination, and communication. And lastly, job creation. A new facility will create a significant number of well-compensated positions.
Turning to the next slide, page 4 of Exhibit A3, can you describe the clinical services and specialty areas that Penn Medicine anticipates will be located at this facility?
So these are the services that we are proposing would be included. So primary care, again, those are the physicians that help navigate care. They're really the front door for many patients to healthcare. Heart and vascular, the neurosciences, which includes brain, spine, and neurology, movement disorders. Musculoskeletal and rheumatology, that's largely your orthopedic care. Women's health, GI, endoscopy, we do hope to have an endoscopy suite. A full set of cancer services, so from radiation oncology and infusion, imaging, our radiology, which will be X-ray, MRI, CT, and mammography. Lab services, as many of us know, we visit the physician and they say, you need to have some lab work done. A retail pharmacy, the outpatient surgical center, of which the endoscopy will be part of. And then we'll have therapy services as well, physical therapy, occupational and speech therapy in the building. And then there's a set of support services on the right-hand side of the slide, talking about building management. We'll certainly have greeters, people that'll guide patients through the setting, clinical navigators, genetic counselors, patient service representatives, to name a few.
How about hours of operation? What are the facility's anticipated hours of operation?
The modeling that we have done is it will be Monday through Friday, 7 A to 8 P. There'll be limited hours on Saturdays. Typically, we find Saturday mornings work very well for the patients, particularly those that need to either have cancer services, infusion, that's a little bit easier to do on a Saturday, and certainly some of the imaging. We know our patients like the flexibility of being able to come on a Saturday morning and have their annual imaging.
Are there any state licensing requirements that Penn Medicine will be required to obtain for the facility?
There are everything from licenses and occupancy to the Department of Health. They will come through and survey the facility, as well as the Board of Pharmacy, and we will be pursuing those approvals.
Those are all the questions that I have for Teresa.
At this time, does the board have any questions for this witness based upon the testimony this witness has provided?
I have a question regarding the retail pharmacy. Are you expecting others to come through that pharmacy or just anyone who is being serviced at the facility?
Largely, it'll be people that'll be serviced at the facility.
But other residents would have that available to them?
If they're Penn Medicine patients, they would.
Any other questions?
Just on the hours on Saturday. I missed the.
Oh, I'm sorry, 7 A to about noontime.
Noon?
Yep. It's flexible at this point. Right now, the modeling's largely been done Monday through Friday. We just know that patients will start to ask us about Saturday hours, particularly for mammographies. I will say that's very popular for people to come on a Saturday and have their annual mammography.
Any other questions for this witness? Okay, thank you, Mr. Davis.
Okay, I'll ask the project architect, Kent Doss, to testify next.
Sir, you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Could you state and spell the word, please, sir?
My name is Kent Doss, Kentdoss.
Thanks, sir.
Kent, you are the architect on the project,
That's correct.
and you are a principal at Array Architects,
Correct. I'm a principal there and I'm our practice area leader for design.
and you're certified by the American Institute of Architecture.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. We have attached a copy of Kent's CV as Exhibit A4. Kent, you've seen that, you've provided that. Does that accurately describe your educational and professional background and experience in the field of architecture? So with that, I would offer Mr. Doss as an expert in architecture.
He'll be so deemed as a result of A4 and the testimony provided.
Thank you. Kent, using slide deck that we've identified as A3, we'll start at page 5. Can you orient the board to the location of the site?
Yes. You see a pointer here. So the site is located along, let's see, along DeKalb Pike. And it's surrounded by the Glenmont Farms neighborhood to the north and to the east. Across DeKalb Pike is the Easy Storage self-storage facility and a Rite Aid drugstore. And just to the south is a small medical office building in an old farmhouse and the car wash on the corner.
Okay, can we go to the next slide, which is page 6 in A3? Can you describe some of the features of the proposed facility?
Yes, there are a variety of exam, diagnostic, and treatment spaces in the facility. As Teresa mentioned, there will be cancer services, imaging services, and things of that nature. The building is approximately 160,000 gross square feet. Parking is provided with a few surface spots for convenience, but mostly through a structured parking garage. The site is also contains a real high density of landscaping, including some pedestrian walkways, some stormwater management gardens, and some neighborhood buffering features. We'll talk more about this as we go forward, but one of the focuses of the design of the building is environmental sustainability, including LEED certification. And finally, I mentioned a little bit before, but and we'll go through them in more detail in coming slides, but there have been a lot of aspects of the design that are specifically to be sensitive to the surrounding neighborhood.
And Ken, that's a good segue if we go to the next slide. Can you talk a little bit more about the environmental sustainability?
Yes. So you know, it's environmental sustainability kind of touches every part of the design, and these are just a few kind of high level bullet points here. So one of the things we're doing is tracking our carbon footprint in a very detailed manner, so that we can reduce the embodied carbon both in the construction of the building, as well as the carbon that results from the operations of the building. That will greatly contribute not just to the community health, but to the health of the planet. We're also, again, our baseline target is LEED Silver certification for the building. We are currently tracking in the LEED Gold category as the design develops. So we hope to better that, but LEED Silver is our target. There are, the stormwater management is a big part of the sustainability approach. And with that, we have things such as green roofs, rain gardens, and structured stormwater basins that all contribute to an effective management of stormwater, so we're not discharging into the sewer systems. We'll also have EV charging stations as part of our parking garage. And finally, we are, as the design develops, we are continuing to study renewable energy sources on site.
So let's turn to page 8 of A3 and using that exhibit, that's a rendered site plan. Can you walk the board through the proposed project?
Yes. So, a few, the main elements of the project are the ambulatory care center here on that faces DeKalb Pike, and the structured parking garage. So as visitors enter the site, we are utilizing an existing signaled intersection for our main access drive. The drop off at the front door of the building, which is located here, is discreetly tucked into a notch in the building between the parking garage and that main wing that faces DeKalb Pike, so that not only is it a kind of sheltered and calming area for arriving patients, but it also screens that activity from the surrounding neighborhoods. The visitor entrance to the parking garage is again on the south side, away from the residential neighborhood. And then we do have a service loop road that runs around the back and the perimeter of the site, which has a right in and right out on the DeKalb Pike. That is intended mainly for fire department access and for service vehicles and loading vehicles and things like that. It's not part of the public access way.
Thanks, Ken. Did your office also prepare building concept elevations of the proposed structures and the sightline exhibits, et cetera, beginning at page 9.
Yes, we did. And so this first page has two elevations. At the top of the page is the west elevation. That's the elevation that faces DeKalb Pike. And then the lower elevation is the south elevation. That's the one where the main entrance to the building is located. A couple of things I'll point out here. The main materials of the building, what you're seeing in the dark, it's looking brown on this, but it's actually a deeper red color, are brick. These areas are glass and metal panel, and then the garage are precast panels. The entry has a large expanse, double height expanse of glass as you come into the building.
Okay, so if we go to page 10, what are we seeing there, Kent?
So page 10, the top drawing is the north elevation. The bottom drawing is the east elevation. So as we look at these, I wanted to point out a couple of things, particularly on the north elevation. As the building gets closer to the residential side here, there are several setbacks in the building that move the occupied spaces of the building further away from the residential neighborhood. What's on the ground floors are service areas and imaging modalities, things that don't have windows and it can be a lower height. As we move up into the building on the second and third floor, all of the glass that faces the residential neighborhood will be obscured glass, so there won't be views out of the building into the neighborhood. And then as we get up into the fourth floor of the building, we do have 4 windows there that are clear glazing, but those are all in supervised infusion bays in that department. So they're not, they are under constant supervision from nurses. So moving forward, the next page, page 11, is showing a north-south site section, which is providing a little more detail on the relationship between the residential neighborhood and the building. So this particular diagram is illustrating the views that would be out of those 4th floor windows toward the residential neighborhood to the north. So we wanted to kind of show the kind of effective screening that we're doing both from the building side and from the neighbor's side. So you can see at the far left of the page is an outline of the residential property. And I will say, I should qualify this, the information we have on the residential lots, we haven't done a detailed survey of those lots. Those are all from GIS satellite information. So they're approximate, but they're pretty correct. So from the residential neighborhood, there's an existing berm, landscape berm that's on site that we'll be maintaining and utilizing. At the top of that berm, we're placing a privacy fence along the property line. We've also got a very dense landscaping along those property lines. Our landscape architect will talk about in more detail later. And as we get further into the building, you'll notice this element that's shown here is a light pole, and it's just illustrating the light cone that is directed back into the site and shielded from the surrounding neighborhood, so we don't get light pollution and light spill from the building site into the neighborhood. So these blue triangles up here represent the views out of those 4 patient windows. So what they're trying to show is that as we move horizontal in that view cone, the view down and into the neighboring properties is blocked by the landscaping, while the view up and into the sky is open for the benefit of the patients as they're in those spaces.
And Kent, the next slide shows the opposite view from the neighbors.
Correct.
The
next slide shows the view as if you were in the upper story of one of the neighbors' houses, looking back toward the building. And again, talking about how the privacy fence that's along the perimeter of the building, coupled with the landscaping and the berms, is going to effectively block the views of the building.
And turning to page 13 of A3, the isometric view.
So this view is really an orienting device as we move into some of the rendered views in subsequent slides. But just to orient everybody, this is the main DeKalb Pike facade of the building, which we'll show some images of in just a moment. This is DeKalb Pike to the bottom of the page, the entrance drive, and the main building entrance and drop off here in this notch behind. You can also see the extent of the green roofs and the perimeter privacy fence along the site.
And page 14 begins some of building exterior rendering. Walk us through those as well.
Correct. So this view is the facade along DeKalb Pike, the main public facade of the building. So this is in a northbound lane looking northeast as you approach the building. The main materials of the building, again, on this side are brick at the base and then glass and metal panel as you come up the building. You can also see some of the precast panels of the parking garage beyond. Go to the next page. So this page just moves up the street and turns and looks back to the southeast. So again, just kind of looking at the view from DeKalb Pike. You see some of the sidewalks that are along DeKalb Pike, as well as the landscaping around the building. And a feature that's on the site plan that you might have noticed earlier, we refer to as the secret garden. That's behind this landscaping here in a little recessed. That's a private kind of a dining area for patients and staff that's available. Then as we move this more solid element that's off to the left of the building here, that's an egress stair tower. So it's not an occupied.
Okay.
And this next view is kind of the same facade of the building, but just taking a step a little bit further back so that you see how the building steps down as it approaches the residential property line on that side. And again, this you can see it looks a little more red on this view, but the lights are kind of washing this out. But the main materials here on this facade are the brick panels, then moving to glass and metal panel on those facades.
Okay, go to 17, please. Great.
So, and this is a close-up view of the secret garden as you're down in it, in the landscaping, and seeing the access from the building. And then the final rendering here is of the main entrance into the building, which shows the garage on the right-hand side and the main patient areas on the left-hand side, and then the double height glass of the entrance in the center.
Thanks, Ken. The zoning ordinance has some specific requirements with respect to parking structures.
Yes.
And they're in section 230-138.2. Are you familiar with those?
Yes.
Okay, that section of the ordinance limits the height of parking structures to 60% of the height of the tallest principal structure that it serves. And it limits to 4 the number of levels of parking that can be above grade. Will this parking structure comply with those requirements?
Yes, it will. We have one subgrade parking level, and then we have the 4 that are above. The height of the building is 61 feet, which means that at that 60% height limit, would be allowed to have a garage that would be 36.6 feet. The current design, the height of the garage is 34.6 feet, so we're 2 feet under the allowable.
And the design, also in that section of the ordinance, the design of the exterior of the parking structure has to be compatible with the exterior of the principal structure. Will the parking structure comply with that requirement?
Yes, it will. The parking structure is, again, precast panels, but they're both colored and textured to blend with the overall facade of the building. Particularly, as you notice, the front facade has a little bit of texture to it, a vertical kind of sawtooth striation that's picked up in the precast panels of the parking garage.
So I wanted to touch on the height and also the design of the exterior, but will the parking structure comply with all of the other requirements set forth in the zoning ordinance? It's section, again, 230-138.2 for parking structure.
Yes, it will.
Okay. Those are all the questions I have for Mr. Doss.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. Doss related to this testimony? I assume we're going to hear from the site engineer, the traffic engineer, and a landscape architect to testify to those matters. All right.
It looks like the walkways are permeable, the way they are illustrated anyway, are they? Like a paver stone?
Tanya, can you turn your microphone?
It appears that the walkways are designed with permeable pavers. Is that the case?
It is a pervious surface, and our landscape architects will be able to tell you more about
Okay.
that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the architect? And again, if questions do come up at the end, we can bring witnesses back at that appropriate time. Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Next up is the civil engineer, Chris Potterjoy from Benoni Associates. Actually, not Benoni Associates anymore, is it? Sorry.
Sir, solemnly swear to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Could you state your name and spell please for the board?
Chris Potterjoy, CHRISPOTERJOY.
Thank you, sir.
And Chris, you are the civil engineer on the project.
That's correct.
And as I mentioned, you are employed by Benoni Engineering Firm.
Yes,
And we've attached a copy of your CV as Exhibit A5. Does that accurately reflect your educational and professional background and experience in the field of civil engineering?
yes, it does.
With that, I would offer Chris as an expert in civil engineering.
Incorporating the CV marked as A5, he'll be so deemed an expert.
Thank you. Chris, working with the architect and the other design consultants, you prepared the site plan that's attached as Exhibit Exhibit A3 as page 19.
Yes, I have.
And that's the same exhibit that we saw earlier in the deck at page 8, I believe.
Yes,
So through your work on this project, have you become familiar with the Montgomery Township zone ordinance regulations that are applicable to ambulatory healthcare centers?
yes,
And on Exhibit A3, page 20, there's a zoning compliance chart. Did you prepare that?
yes. Our office prepared this.
Okay. I want to walk you through some of the specific requirements. The zoning ordinance permits ambulatory healthcare centers by conditional use in the commercial district. Is the subject property located entirely within the commercial zoning district?
Yes,
And the ordinance requires a minimum lot size of 10 acres. Does this site comply?
it does. The property is 11.95 acres.
And maximum building coverage is 30%. Will this project comply?
Yes, as proposed right now, the plan is at 22.53%.
And the ordinance calls for a 25-foot planting area alongside and rear yards, but 50 feet where the property abuts a residential use or district. Will
Yeah.
this project comply?
Yeah, this is correct. The residential district is on the left side or the north side of the property, and also the east side or the top of the page here. And that landscape buffer will meet the 50-foot required minimum.
And Chris, the parking requirement is one space per 200 square feet of gross floor area. Will the site comply?
Yes, it will.
It's also a requirement that the site take direct access onto a state or county road with 100 feet of right-of-way. Will the site comply?
Yes, the two entrances are off of DeKalb Pike, which allows this to comply.
The ordinance also requires that the site be served by public water and sewer. Will the site be served by public water and sewer?
Yes, it will.
Let's talk about exterior lighting. There are specific requirements in the ordinance that govern exterior lighting. The maximum height of pole-mounted lights can't exceed 25 feet. There are minimum, maximum, and average foot candle requirements along buildings and parking areas. Will the site comply, and can you show the board? If so, can you show the board how?
Yes, it will comply. I've pulled up Exhibit A3, page 21, which is a rendering of our lighting plan. On this rendering, we have a few different types of lights that are proposed at ground level along the perimeter drive. For the property itself, there are light poles, which will be no more than 25-foot mounting height. And then on the top deck of the parking garage, we have different lights proposed. On the exterior of the garage, the lights will be mounted to a parapet wall. And also on the interior, there will be light poles, which will be at 19-foot mounting height. The photometrics that we submitted with our plan set show compliance with the light levels suggested.
Okay, and turning to sheet or page 22 of A3, exterior lighting also has to be shielded to protect abutting streets and properties from glare. The ordinance requires that the shielding eliminate glare beyond 35 degrees and fully obscure the light sources, that is the bulbs, from off the premises. Will the site comply and just page 22 of Exhibit A3 establish that, help to establish that?
Yeah, so on page 22, we have a few different things that I'll walk through here in regards to compliance here. First of all of the light fixtures will be equipped with a full cutoff shield, which helps to direct that light directly down towards the surface as opposed to, from any other area. That's helped by represented here with the triangle that I'm hovering over right now on ground level. The other thing that we've done is for the parking garage, we have taken the top deck and we've extended the parapet wall so that it's roughly 6 foot above the surface of the parking deck. And what this does is two things. One, it allows, as I mentioned previously, the exterior lights on the garage to be mounted to that wall so that they're obscured from off property. It also helps to cut off any visibility of the interior poles, which are mounted at approximately 19 foot. The blue line that is shown on this exhibit generally shows the angle of which we would need to be obscured. So as described in this, the site, as we see, is meeting the intent of this code.
Chris, will there be any flashing, intermittent, or moving lights?
No.
Okay, and the ordinance requires pedestrian activity to build connectivity rather to building entrances, parking, trails, common areas by way of a pathway system. Is the project proposing a pathway system?
Yes, it is. The first thing that I'll highlight is that along the DeKalb Pike frontage, there's currently a sidewalk here today, which will be slightly reconfiguring as part of this design. It provides, instead of it being a little bit more linear like it is today, there's a bit meandering to it, which helps to give a little bit of character to the site. That walkway then extends through the site on the north of the property, as well as the east, and then back to the south side to create an internal loop, really intended for patients and employees of the site, but would be also available through connection to the main frontage at the Cal Pike.
And Chris, will the project comply with the bulk and area requirements of the commercial district? And by that I mean building height, yard requirements, impervious coverage, those sorts of things?
Yes, it will. That was highlighted on the zoning table that was shown previous in this presentation.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit now about the general conditional use standards in the zoning ordinance found in section 230-156.2C1 through 13. First, have you reviewed the township's comprehensive plan?
Yes, we have.
And in your opinion, is the proposed use consistent with that plan?
Yes, I would agree.
And in your professional opinion, will the proposed use promote the health, safety, and welfare of the community?
Yes.
In your opinion, is the use suitable for the character of the neighborhood and the uses of surrounding properties?
Yes, it is.
Will the use impair the adequate supply of light and air to any other properties?
No.
Will the proposed use unduly burden water, sewer, school, park, or other public facilities?
No.
In your opinion, will the use overcrowd land or create an undue concentration of the population?
No, it will not.
I mentioned earlier that we have compiled review letters as Exhibit A9. Is Penn Medicine comfortable that the project can and will comply with any outstanding comments in the township review letters?
Yes, we believe we can comply with all of the township review letters.
Those are all the questions I have for Mr. Potterjoy.
Does the board have any questions at this time?
Will those lights shut off?
Your microphone on.
Will the lights shut down when the place closes in the evening? Or will they always be on?
So the township code does require for lights
Some
to be
kind of
dimmed
lights.
after 10 p.m. It is our intention that that will be the case. There will need to be some light level maintained for safety,
Right.
obviously. So yeah, they will be dimmed in accordance with township requirements.
Are you providing for a crosswalk across DeKalb Pike at
Um,
that signal?
I believe that there's currently a crosswalk there. If there is not one, that would be part of any PennDOT permitting that is necessary. But yes, we will have crosswalk.
Okay, and so I would also want to confirm that there was signalization there for using the crosswalk. That's, that there's a signal there
Yeah,
to
there would be
indicate.
signal enhancements as
Right,
needed.
right. Are you the right person to ask about the design of the walkways?
In terms of the permeable nature.
Yes.
I can speak a little bit to it from the stormwater
Okay.
standpoint, but Matt Nelson, the landscape architect, can also
Okay.
speak more to the material of it. But it is the intention that the walkway would be permeable, and potentially other areas of the site, such as the drop-off circle, may have a permeable nature to it. In our stormwater calculations, we are not taking a credit for the permeable aspect of it. We're calling it impervious in our calculations.
Oh, okay.
I have a question myself. Looking at the review letters that were provided that you've referenced, one of the review letters are from the fire chief. It's, sub exhibit 3, which references the need for a final resolution related to the tower ladder placement in front of the building and working towards a solution in that situation. Is that a matter that you're going to be able to address prior to final land development if you're approved for this use tonight?
Yes, we believe this is something that could be handled as part of land development. In fact, we have had some conversations with the fire chief in regard to this. Basically, what we're anticipating doing right now is there is a walkway along DeKalb Pike that we have through here. There may need to be a slight realignment of it to bring it maybe a little bit closer to the building, and then potentially expand on the width of it. It wouldn't be necessarily to widen it as a paved surface, but maybe add a grass paver that would provide access for the aerial apparatus if needed. And we do intend to continue to work with the fire chief on this matter.
And if approved tonight, the plans may change to accommodate that need slightly.
It would be very slight adjustment to the trail more so than anything. The building wouldn't change at all.
Does anybody else have any questions for this witness?
No.
Mr. Davis?
I'll ask our landscape architect to testify.
I do. Sure. It's Matthew Nelson, MATTHEW, NELSON.
Thank you. Matt, you are the landscape architect on the project?
That's correct.
And you're employed by Jonathan Alderson Landscape Architects,
Yes,
and you're a registered landscape architect in the state of Pennsylvania.
correct.
And we've attached your CV as Exhibit A6. Does that accurately reflect your educational and professional background and experience in the field of landscape architecture?
Yes, it does.
With that, I would offer Matt as an expert in landscape architecture.
Incorporating applicant's Exhibit 6, Mr. Nelson will be recognized as an expert in landscape architecture.
Thank you. Matt, did your office prepare the landscape plan and landscape exhibits that follow it, beginning on page 23 of Exhibit A3?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so starting there, can you walk the board through the proposed landscaping for the project?
Yes, absolutely. We'll use this plan as sort of a jumping off point, but we have a lot of more detailed slides beyond this. And we've already sort of touched on the overall layout of the site, but I will point out a couple things related to the landscape design. One being the frontage along DeKalb Pike. Our engineer mentioned the walkway through here. That is sort of a rolling low earthen berm that is also going to have a meadow, a wildflower meadow, and a series of street trees and flowering trees to help sort of soften that frontage on DeKalb. The other thing I'll point out is the secret garden. The reason we're sort of mounding some of the earth up along the frontage is to tuck this garden in and make it feel more private, which it is. It's not open to the public. It's only open to patients, staff, and visitors of the facility. I'd also point out that we are compliant with all the landscaping requirements laid out in the land development ordinance and the zoning code. The most important of which that we'll discuss in detail tonight is the 50-foot wide planting buffer on the top of the page, which is east, and the left of the slide, which is north. We are compliant with that. We're also hitting street tree requirements along DeKalb Pike. We also have stormwater management facility landscaping requirements that we are touching on, and the off-street loading requirements that we're touching on as well. So with that, I will turn to slide 24, Exhibit A3. Now this slide describes the extent of the proposed meadow. And so we have about 2.5 acres of meadow proposed on this project. And this would be a seeded meadow. So we have specified a seed mix of predominantly grasses and wildflowers, all native to this region. In general, in terms of maintenance, this sort of helps to reduce the mowing needs of the site. So over time, this is a net benefit for the community, for the environment, and for Penn Medicine as well. It also sort of ties into our stormwater management conversation. And so the meadows promote infiltration, and they cut down on the stormwater runoff, and they provide habitat for wildlife and pollinators as well. And there's a few images that are meant to serve as examples on the right-hand side of what this might look like throughout the seasons. On slide 25, this describes the extent of the rain gardens, and so we've with this project, we are trying to creatively manage stormwater. So as opposed to locating one large basin at the low point of the site, we're sort of sprinkling those around the site in a series of smaller rain gardens, and these would be just sort of slight depressions in the land, and they'll be planted with trees, shrubs, wildflowers, grasses, and you can see on the plan where they occur. There's a big one right near the entrance off of DeKalb Pike. There's a small one near the drop-off. There's two toward the north of the site. Left-hand side of the page, there's 3 small ones in the secret garden. And then our largest stormwater management facility is toward the top right of the plan, which is the southeast corner of the property. On slide 26, this just describes the extent of the green roofs proposed on the project. We have 29,000 square feet of extensive green roofs, which means it's just a shallow soil depth of 4 to 6 inches. This will be a tray system of primarily sedums, which are the plant most commonly used in this condition. On slide 27, we have the extent of the walking paths. As Chris mentioned, we have sidewalks along DeKalb Pike, but those also connect sort of internally toward the main entrance and the drop off, and then you can begin to meander around the east of the site, which is Plan North, and the left hand side of the slide, which is the north of the site. And all in, this is about a half-mile walking loop. And to answer your question about the material, we are using a porous pavement. We have specified it's called porous pave. It's essentially a mix of stone aggregate and recycled rubber. So it has the look of like an asphalt, but with a little bit of a reddish color to it. But it's softer as you walk on it, so it's sort of comfortable, but it also, the water goes like right through it. So this is on slide 28. So this is just a detailed plan of the secret garden, and just a few things we'll point out here is this is meant to be a healing garden. It's going to also serve as an outdoor dining. It's going to serve as gathering for small groups or for individuals. This can be a quiet space, and the design intent was that it's sunken down from the road, so you really don't feel that you're close to the front of the property near DeKalb Pike. And there's some images at the top of the slide and on the right-hand side of the slide that describe the aesthetic of the landscape and the spaces we anticipate in this space. And on slide 29, this is the main entrance drop-off. In the middle of the vehicular drive is a rain garden. We anticipate using permeable pavers, which is for the driving surface, which is highlighted by the picture in the top right-hand corner. And you can see some of the columnar trees that line the parking garage. And then some of the images at the top and on the right-hand side describe the character of the landscape that we are designing for this space.
So Matt, on page 30 of Exhibit A3, the zoning ordinance requires that off-street loading areas be buffered with sound barrier fencing or a combination of fencing and landscaping not less than 6 feet in height. And the purpose is to obscure 75% of light emitted from vehicular headlights. Does Exhibit A3, page 30, show the location of the proposed sound barriers around the loading area?
Yes, it does. I will point them out. We have 5 of them. One just to the left of the loading dock, and there's 4 toward the top of the page, which is east of the loading dock. These are each about 40 feet long and 8 feet tall and 3 feet thick. And we're using a galvanized steel gabion basket filled with recycled stone from the site. So we're not importing stone from the site. The intent is that any stone that's excavated for the construction of the building could be reused on site.
And will those barriers meet the requirement to obscure 75% of light from headlights?
Yes, they will.
Okay. In response to some comments that we received from the township consultants, did your office prepare an exhibit showing the heights of the proposed screen plantings at various periods after they're planted?
Yes, we did. On slide 31, and there's going to be 3 of these slides, and I'll describe these in detail. So this slide is showing a diagram essentially of the 50-foot wide screen buffer. And this is at planting. So you can see the small dots are all the evergreen trees that we are proposing along the entire east property line and north property line. And on the left-hand side, these are the quantities of plant material that we are proposing go in. So for one, we're going to save, the plan's call to save 34 existing trees. And then we have 185 proposed evergreen trees at various sizes at installation, 32 proposed shade trees, 37 proposed flowering trees, and 102 proposed shrubs. This is not on the entire site. This is just the screen buffer, the 50-foot wide screen buffer. On slide 32, this is the most important because the code requires 100% visual screening within 4 years of planting. So this slide depicts compliance with that code. And we did an enlargement of that on the bottom right-hand corner. I should also mention that the growth habit of the trees and the growth rate of the trees were all sort of meticulously researched, and we are citing the ANSI standards, American Standard for Nursery Stock, and the Arbor Day website and Missouri Botanical Garden website, which are reputable sources in our field. So we have an exact understanding of what how tall the trees should be at year 4, how wide they should be at year 4, and those are tied to the actual species that we have proposed in our plans. So this diagram is very accurate in that regard. Slide 33 just shows what the planting, the density of the planting would look like at year 10. We just did this as a study for ourselves and for you to better understand this, and you can see just how dense the plantings are at year 10.
Yeah, Matt, you talked about the requirement to achieve 100% screen. And we talked about a 6-foot tall perimeter fence, wooden board perimeter fence. Will the proposed plantings, in combination with the perimeter fence and the sound barrier walls, achieve 100% screen from the residential neighbors' properties within 4 years of planting?
Yeah, yes, they will.
And does slides 34 and 35 help to demonstrate that?
Yes, slide 34 is the view from the east looking toward the parking garage. In the foreground of the slide, you'll see the 6-foot wood board privacy fence that is set within 5 feet of the property line. And the proposed trees along this edge are proposed to be planted at the top of the existing berm to sort of best utilize the height of that berm. And point out as well, just to sort of illustrate that berm, the bottom of the berm is approximately where this blue dashed line is in the backyards of the adjacent properties. And the red dashed line is the property line here.
Matt, you mentioned the location of the 6-foot wood board fence. That issue came up at the Planning Commission meeting. There was some question about exactly where the fence is going to be located. Do we know specifically where that fence will be located today?
Yes, I mean, it will be located as close to the property line as possible. It has to be within 5 feet of the property line per the code. And a few reasons we did that, as I just mentioned, is that we want the new plants to be located at the highest point of the berm because those grow over time and give you the best benefit of that screening. And there's also a maintenance aspect to this as well. If we locate the fence within the property boundary, then there's plants to maintain on the outside of the fence in the adjacent properties, sort of backyards, and we don't want to have Penn Medicine do that. So
Those are all the questions that I have for Matt.
Point of clarity, the fence then is proposed. So there's a 5-foot berm and then a 6-foot fence on top of that 5-foot berm. So essentially 11 feet of screening from the ground level and then the trees in addition to that.
That's correct. Yes.
And just to be careful in how we answer that, I think the answer to that is yes in some cases and no in others, right? So I don't know that the fence, if it will achieve the top of the 5-foot berm in all locations. We're going to put it there where we can. The ordinance dictates that we keep it within 5 feet of the property line. So if the top of the berm is farther away from that, we can't put it on there, but we're going to do our absolute best to do that. I just wanted to be careful that we.
And Mr. Dave, you're aware that if this is approved tonight and goes through land development, that the board would require the applicant to enter into a covenant for that landscaping, that they'd be required to maintain that landscaping and they wouldn't be able to remove that landscaping without being in violation of our code.
Yes.
And they're willing to enter into that covenant.
Yes.
Any questions for the board?
No, I had some questions about how tall those trees would get and you answered them so nicely for me. Thank you.
I do have a question on the walking path. What's to prevent just anybody from coming onto the walking path even when the facility is closed? Is there anything deterring that?
I don't think there's anything proposed at the moment. It's not gated, it's not fenced like any other office building or you would see, around the township.
Any other questions?
It seems like the landscaping plan is wonderful on the perimeter and, very sensitive to the concerns of the adjacent residents. Is there any concern whatsoever about overcrowding in those areas? I mean, it does really seem very robust, but we don't have any concerns about the overcrowding and then dying, so that would be unsightly as well.
Right. Yeah. It's a delicate balance for sure. And as we looked at the design of that, we're sort of staggering the plants as opposed to putting them in a straight line where they would grow into each other and outcompete one another. So we feel confident that with the combination of trees proposed and their locations on the plan, that it will get crowded, but we don't think it will be overcrowded.
Okay, thank you.
And you as a landscape architect took that potential growth and the concept of future overcrowding into consideration when you were plotting out where these plantings would go?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
What's the time limit on Penn Medicine maintaining these trees and plants? Say it is a little overcrowded and some things die. Whose responsibility is that?
Well, the covenant would be recorded against the property. Forever. Unless the board wanted to lift that covenant. Of course, if there were issues, it would be within the board's best interest and the applicant's best interest to enter into an amendment to that covenant and to have an agreed upon new landscaping plan. So it isn't something that they could do without your approval. But if things weren't working and you felt that it was necessary to make amendments for the benefit of everybody, you could alter that covenant to allow, whether it be removal of the trees or changing the locations of the trees.
Okay, but currently the covenant just says it is their responsibility to keep things.
Correct. There will, if it's approved tonight, there would be a landscaping plan as part of the final plans that would be submitted for your consideration during the land development process. On those landscaping plans would have the location and I guess the genus of the trees that would be installed there. That plan then is recorded with the covenant that says it has to continue to look like this. It cannot be removed without your approval. As certainly you can provide that approval if they come back and they say, hey, this isn't working. We need help to make this look beautiful, but that would be up to your consideration at that time, relying on staff's opinions and considerations as well.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about the fence and having plantings in front of and behind the fence. How would you access the back of behind the fence to maintain and examine and make sure things are growing properly, et cetera?
So didn't mean to confuse. It is our intent to not have plantings behind the fence.
Okay.
We're going to have that fence as close to the property line as possible.
Okay.
And so all of the plantings that Penn Medicine will be responsible for will be within the boundaries of the fence.
Okay. Because the picture that's shown shows the trees behind the fence.
Yeah.
So I think
This
we're
is
looking
the
towards.
vantage
Oh,
point
you're
of
looking.
the
Okay.
property.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I'm looking at the wrong way.
Mhm.
Like.
That does bring up a good question as far as maintaining the other side, whether it is just grass and making sure it doesn't grow along the fence line. There's sufficient room on your property to maintain that rear area in an attractive way without going on to the neighbor's property in the rear.
We're hopeful that that portion of the property is 6 inches or a foot, and really won't require maintenance. I think that's the idea.
Oh, that's how close it would be.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Please proceed.
Our final witness, Jim Markham of Benoni, our traffic engineer.
I do. Yes, it's James, James, Markham, Markham.
Thank you. Jim, you are the traffic engineer on the project,
I am.
and you are employed by the Benoni engineering firm,
I am.
and you are a licensed professional engineer in the state of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And we've attached a copy of your CV as Exhibit A7. Does that accurately reflect your educational, professional background and experience in the field of transportation engineering?
Yes.
With that, I'd offer Jim as an expert in traffic or transportation engineering, however you'd like to refer to it.
Is he incorporating applicant's Exhibit 7 as a basis? We will admit Mr. Markham as an expert in traffic or transportation engineering.
Thank you. Jim, with respect to traffic, what was your office asked to do in connection with the ambulatory?
We were asked to study and evaluate the traffic around the area of the site, mainly the main intersections. We would identify if there are any traffic issues and any improvements that would be necessary to mitigate those issues.
Okay, and we've marked a copy of the transportation impact study that was dated July of 2022. It was last revised January 2023 as Exhibit A8. Is that the report that your office prepared?
Yes, it is.
Using that report, can you please describe the efforts and the methodology you employed in performing and preparing that study? Yes.
Okay. So in preparing the traffic study, the first step is to identify the intersections that need to be studied. We proposed a set of intersections and got the feedback from the municipality and from PennDOT that these were appropriate for the traffic study. And I'll just run through them quickly. They're on this final exhibit in the slideshow here. But basically, our site is the highlighted area towards the middle of the exhibit. Towards the top of the exhibit is the intersection of Knapp and DeKalb Pike. Moving down towards our site is the unsignalized intersection of Gwynmont Drive and DeKalb Pike. The existing signal at Gateway Center and DeKalb Pike. At the bottom of the image are the 3 signalized intersections that cover the triangle of 202 Welsh Road and DeKalb Pike, and then finally Knapp Road and 202 up and to the right. So we propose those intersections as appropriate for this traffic study. The traffic engineer and PennDOT agreed, and we collected data at these intersections last year in May. We used that data to model the traffic conditions at these intersections. So the first step was to understand the existing conditions with the existing traffic data. We created that model, and then the next step is to propose how much traffic is generated by the site. Now, their common way to do this is with a manual produced by ITE. It's called trip generation, has a lot of data on a lot of different uses. A close use to the proposed use here is clinic, but it's not entirely appropriate. All the sites in ITE manual are less than half the size of this. They don't have the wide array of services as this, and we had the benefit of working on a previous site similar to this, where we identified similar sites that have similar uses and could use that as the data for the proposed trips. So our first round of the traffic study used 3 sites that are similar. In conjunction with your traffic engineer, we discussed the merits of using the most recent one, which is in Radnor, which is the most similar in proposed uses to this site and very recent. So we ended up using the trip generation that was used for that site that was developed by Penn Medicine recently. And we did a traffic count out there to confirm that what we thought the trip generation was going to be when we did that site was in fact what the trip generation was. So we confirmed that, used that to identify how many trips this site will generate. Now that's based on the number of patient positions within the site. You saw that there's a bunch of different uses within the site, but each of them are centered around a patient in some way or another, and that's what ultimately dictates the traffic. So we identified the number of patient positions, used that to generate the amount of proposed trips, and then distributed those trips to the intersections which we had already counted and developed the existing conditions model. With those proposed trips, we could identify future traffic conditions that would result from developing this site. That's all pretty typical for a traffic study. The trip generation is a little unusual, but it's just very typical. So we were able to model the future conditions of the site, of the intersections if the site was not being built, and then if the site was being built. So we have a good understanding of our impacts of our site. That's generally how a traffic study works.
And can you talk, Jim, about what the results that came out of the study and the conclusions that you drew from those results in terms of mitigation required, if any?
Sure. So in the no build condition and the build condition, meaning the site is not built or built, all the intersections in the study operate at a level of C or better. Now, level of C is a shorthand for a measure of delay that is used in traffic engineering. Generally, in this type of area, D or better is considered acceptable. So with or without the development, all the intersections would operate at a level service of C. The PennDOT standard is if at any intersection your site is increasing the delay by 10 seconds or more, you would have to propose mitigation to address that increase in delay. And at no intersection is the build condition increasing the delay by 10 seconds or more.
I want to walk you through some requirements and some language directly out of the zoning ordinance. For all uses that are permitted by conditional use in the township, the zoning ordinance requires that points of vehicular access be located at a distance from intersections and in a number sufficient to prevent traffic hazards and obstruction to the movement of traffic. In your opinion, does the project comply with that requirement?
Yes, it does. In particular, the main entrance, as you saw, is utilizing an existing intersection. It's a three-legged intersection functionally now. We're just adding the fourth leg. We've agreed to do some upgrades to some of the equipment at that intersection, but in essence, it's at the same intersection. The secondary driveway, we measured the site distance, and the existing site distance at that location is more than the minimum required site distance. So that's also a safe place for the driveway.
The zoning ordinance also requires that the safe capacity of roads not be exceeded by the estimated traffic generated by the use, and the generated traffic is not out of character with the normal traffic using said roads. In your opinion, will the use comply with this requirement?
Yes. Yeah, that was the discussion I just had about the increase in delay versus existing conditions in present day conditions and projected to the future. We projected out to 2030, and yeah, we comply with that requirement.
Okay. And the last requirement I want to ask you about relates to congestion. The zoning ordinance requires that the use not create significant additional traffic congestion where there is existing congestion, or pose a threat of additional congestion where there is a high probability of future congestion. In your opinion, will the use comply with that requirement?
Yes, it will. The ordinance says congestion. The term we use is delay, typically. But yes, as I described, the existing and proposed future conditions will comply with that.
Those are all the questions I have for Mr. Markham.
Any questions from the board? So Mr. Markham, you said that you actually compared the ITE theoretical counts to the actual counts in Radnor related to this use, and they were what you would expect them to be. They were on par. Is that your testimony?
That's not exactly what I said. The ITE manual doesn't have a use that is appropriate to use for this proposed use here. So we looked at the ITE data, and it has descriptions of what they are. So an example I like to use, if we were proposing a CVS, there's thousands of drugstores of a similar use around the country that has data in the ITE manual. This is a relatively new medical use. It's got a whole bunch of different things going on in there. That Penn Medicine has a number of facilities in the area around that we could use rather than use ITE, so we can paint a more accurate picture. So we use that to generate the theoretical trips, and to help us feel better about that, we went back and counted the recently developed Radnor site, so that the trip gen we thought that site would generate is in fact what that site is generating. So when we use that methodology here, we can feel good about that's how it's going to end up.
So the uses that didn't exactly fit, but you took your best estimate of finding those uses at this site, were in line with the Radnor site to kind of confirm what your thoughts would be under the ITE.
That's correct.
This is a commercially zoned property. And I'm not sure if you're aware of some of the other uses how that are permitted in the commercial district. How would the traffic generation from this use compare to some other commercial properties that would be permitted at a commercially zoned site?
You want me to share with you some of the uses that would be permitted on the site in the commercial district? A short list, and I don't have in my shorthand, I don't have whether these are permitted by right or by conditional use, but they're permitted. A hotel or a motel, a fitness center, fraternal organization, a rooming house, tourist home, restaurant, sit down or drive through, with outdoor dining, tap room, tavern, just as a sampling.
That's quite an array. And they all have slightly different traffic characterizations, right? Hotels, their peak occupancy is the middle of the night, right? So their trip generation is a little different than some of the other uses. Generally, the ambulatory care center, what we've noticed is the traffic is spread more throughout the day. We focus typically on peak hours in traffic studies. The peak hour traffic for an ambulatory care center isn't so bad as compared to a lot of other uses. You can imagine an office building, right? People come in during the morning peak hour and leave in the evening peak hour. That's not the case with ambulatory care center. It's just more spread out, so the peak hours just aren't so bad.
Any questions based upon the questions I asked?
Yeah, I really wanted to focus in on the on table 6. You talk about the trip generation. I've been hearing for a lot of assertions that there was over 4,000 trips per weekday, and that would be a little over 2,000 for entering and exiting. So that number is kind of a stunning number. But so what you're saying is that I just want to make sure this is clear, that those numbers are spread out throughout the 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and that we'll call them the rush hour times, that they would be closer to 400 and a little about 350 for those AM and PM.
Yeah, so right beneath table 6,
Yes.
it gets into the very nitty gritty
Yes.
of the AM and PM peak hour trips. So 404 vehicular trips in the AM peak hour. I mean, spread throughout the busiest hour in the morning, there are 404 projected trips. Now, 327 of them are entering and 77 of them are exiting. So a trip is either entering or exiting. Right? So one car could be 2 of those trips, right?
Okay.
One entering, one exiting, if they were using the drop off.
Right.
Similarly, further in that sentence, 342 vehicular trips are in the PM peak hour, but as you might expect, 65 are entering and 277 are exiting.
Right. So the 4,000, yes, it does, because the 4,000 number was troubling, and yet when you realize that as it's divided amongst the hours of the day, and that's actually a double count in some ways, because it's one car. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Mr. Davis, turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Walker. Those are all of our witnesses. But just ask at this time if the board would accept exhibits A1 through A9 into evidence and make them part of the record.
Yes, those exhibits are so admitted as part of the record and evidence.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, to see if the board has any follow-up questions for any of Mr. Davis's witnesses that were called, now that you've gotten a chance to hear from all witnesses.
I do not.
No.
Sheriff, I did have a question for Ms. Larity, actually related to the hours and the unloading or loading. I did hear that you testified that the hours of operation are from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and again, maybe 7 to noon, approximately, maybe on the weekends. Would those also be the hours that you would expect deliveries to occur?
Deliveries to these
Or
types.
loading and unloading operations in general?
Typically, deliveries come in the morning, but they would certainly comply with the ordinance of when drop-offs could be. It's rare that you would have anything late in the evening, like 7 p. or 8 p.
Would you expect any deliveries on Sundays?
No.
As far as just make sure we're using the same terminology. The loading hours shall be limited to 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. under the ordinance. Does loading hours also include the backing up of the truck, the beeping, the engine sort of idling there? Trying to avoid a situation where a truck shows up at 6 a.m., beeps and then idles up until 7 o'clock and then starts the loading or unloading. Do you anticipate having vehicles there prior to 7 a.m. in that capacity?
We don't. We work very closely with our vendors to make sure that they understand what the local ordinances are and that they respect them as well.
Would you agree to a condition of relief if so granted to ensure that the loading hours entails that the vehicles cannot be backing up and idling prior to 7 a.m. as well?
We would.
Thank you. I have no other questions.
When you were here previously, we had asked about a pilot payment and whether or not you were amenable to that. There were some concerns that were expressed by residents related to tax income from this property. And is that still the case that you're amenable to discussing further pilot payment?
Certainly. Open to discussing.
We certainly don't want to make that a part of the conditional use approval, but
No.
certainly open to the conversation. Sure. Sorry.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any questions for any of the witnesses before we turn over to public comment? Hearing seeing none. Mr. Davis, no other witnesses at this time?
No, sir.
Okay. So I'm going to open it up for public comment. And again, it's time to make comment. Mr. Davis, I'll leave it up to you whether or not you'd like to present any witnesses to rebut any comments or questions that you feel are pertinent, or so you have a full opportunity to respond if necessary. The questions and the comments are to be made to the board. Again, if the board feels the need to follow up with additional questions, the board will do so. And again, I'll give Mr. Davis the opportunity to respond to any comments that he feels he needs to respond to.
Just step back at this
Yes, at this point in time. So again, we're going to open up for public comment. Again, when you come forward, if you could please give your name. You don't have to give your exact street address, but feel free to provide the general areas where you live. And if you could please spell your name for the court reporter. And I guess we can just start on the first row. Seeing none. And again, this is just on the actual, we're still in the hearing. So anything else on the agenda that's not at this time, this is just for the hearing. Second row. Third row, and I see someone getting up.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to do the public comments here. So my name is Denise Dorshaw, Dorshaw. My residence sits directly behind this plan. And today there are a lot of trees behind the property that are covered in pink ink and pink ribbons. They're the highest trees behind us. And from my second floor, and I know that there's testimony to the fact that satellite images say we won't see most of this, I can assure you we will, because we do today. And my comments are a couple of things. One, I would behoove all of you to see for yourself or have someone look at the top of that berm and what you can see. And on my second floor window is above that berm. So I can see directly across the property where everything's been cut out already. The second thing I wanted to ask, the 50-foot distance between them that they're going to be landscaping in, is that from the driveway or is that from the property line? I just need to know that answer as well. I'm concerned to hear that there's 19-foot lights on top of the parking garage, because that only allows me to see more into that property than I thought I was going to be seeing. So I'd like to have that taken into consideration. A 19-foot light is almost like adding another floor on the garage that I'm going to be able to see from my property. The walking paths, one of you questioned it. We're starting to have a little bit of crime in the neighborhood that has been reported to the local police. People were trying to break into the cars. Having access to the back of our properties through a walking path that I didn't hear at the supervisor meeting. Concerns me a little bit as a resident that abuts this. The evergreens, it's the first time I saw what the height of them are going to be. I would want to be assured that they grow to a decent height. The other is that the property line itself, prior to us even purchasing our property 30 years ago, parts of it were cut out and they sit adjunct to the property line. So I would be concerned as to whether or not it's going to change my existing landscape, meaning it'll cut diagonally on my property that goes straight across today. So I would like to know that as well. Those are the questions and comments that I have for all of you. But I would take into consideration this is abutting a residential neighborhood. And the satellite images that I saw tonight, that's not the reality. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Why don't we just respond one at a time, Mr. Davis? The lighting pole length, feel free to have the witness come up. Is that a code requirement to have it at that length? And then I guess the other question is related to how the 50-foot buffering distance was measured from.
So the 50-foot buffer requirement is from the property line. So I don't know if that's a simple answer to that question. It's measured from the property line inward toward our property. Okay. That's where that 50-foot buffer yard will be established. 19 feet light standards on top of the parking garage. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so on our original plan, I believe we had those as taller light poles. We actually brought them down in height since then. It was kind of a combination of working with that parapet wall and reducing the height of those lights on the mid-bay section of the garage. That what we were trying to do is balance that impact with the view from offsite, as I had presented on that figure previously. So they are not as tall as permitted by code.
Can we just take them off? Do we actually need lights to be on the very top of the building?
You do need lights on top of the building. I mean, the hours of operation in wintertime months would extend into dark hours after 4:30. So you would need lights for safety for anyone coming and going from the building at that point.
You couldn't use lights that are down on the ground and face up somewhat? I mean, I'm trying to help here.
Understood. It's balancing the photometrics. The code requires a specific light level. In order to do that, it's playing with the height of the light itself, the type of light, etc., and trying to maintain those light levels. So if you were to bring the pole down in height, you would ultimately likely need to add more light fixtures. So we're trying to limit the amount of light fixtures and balance everything together. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry. There was also a question about the walking path. And when we originally proposed the plan, it did not include a perimeter fence. It now does, with no gaps, no gates. It's not going, so no one will be able to access the neighbors' properties from the Penn Medicine site.
And that would be a solid fence?
Yes.
And that would be a wooden fence of some kind.
And then you mentioned that there might be areas where.
Play your microphone.
I hear myself so loud. That there'll be areas where there would not be a fence, where you might not be able to put a fencing, or fencing will go all the way.
Yes, ma'am.
Around. Okay.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to continue with comment.
Yeah, hi, it's Steve Dorshaw, DOR SHAW 106 Trotter. The screen buffering, the construction period, is it going to be in place at the beginning of that construction period or at the end? We're going to be watching all this go on. The other question is there hours of construction days? You know, what is that? Is it going to go into the nighttime? And then I think it was mentioned at the Planning Commission meaning that it was going to take about 18 months for the construction to complete. Those are my questions.
Thank you. So, Mr. Davis, are you aware of what would be required on the site? Maybe your engineer at the commencement of the construction?
Is it Matt or is it Chris? You can answer that question. What's the timing sequence of the plantings versus construction of the?
Landscape typically is installed last. Unless there's a different plan in place, but that's the typical construction sequencing is landscape is last.
What about the fence?
That's usually in the landscape contractor scope, so typically it would be last as well.
Does it have to be last?
It's out of the way, so I don't imagine it would be a problem to install earlier.
At least at the back.
Yeah, of course.
Would you accept it as a condition, assuming that it's plausible and capable of being put in without having to damage the fence or redo it, to have that fence or an equivalency visual barrier installed during the construction process?
I want to say yes. Can I look to my right and behind me? Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
And the time length of the construction, generally, again, we're not going to hold you to anything, but from the time the plans are, let's say from the first pre-construction meeting, you have your building permit, to the time that the heavy machinery is off the site. Do we know?
Yeah, we don't have anybody technically. Chris is.
Yeah, I've been in a lot of the meetings for the project. Based on the discussions that we've had in our experience with similar facilities, 18 months does sound to be about the right time from beginning of construction to completion.
Thank you. And again, we're not going to hold you to that at that time, but just general pictures at this point.
Yep.
Thank you.
He also asked about hours and days of construction. Is there any way to tell that?
I mean, at this time, no. We would obviously have to comply to anything in regard to township's requirements for when can construction start, and those are typically defined in your ordinances.
And you'll follow all of our ordinance requirements for
Yes.
times. And in our land development agreements that we require to make sure that sanitary facilities are provided, that there's no dirt tracked off site, all of those items, that there's proper parking for contractors. You'll make sure that those are followed as well.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to proceed on. We can come back. We can come back. We're going to move to the next row, fourth row. Anyone?
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Bill Payne, Payne. I live at 101 Trotter Lane, which is adjacent to the proposed site. I have a concern. Well, first, I'd like to ask a question, and that is whether or not the fence can be taller than 6 feet. I also have a concern about the landscaping. It looked like about a quarter of the planned trees were not evergreen. And I'm not sure if maybe those were going to be planted more in the interior of the property or not, but obviously that provides no screening value for half the year. So thank you.
Why don't we come back? Do you have any response to that? I mean, is there a reason that you chose 6 foot for the fence?
I think the ordinance allows 8 side area. I think we'd be willing to provide the fence if the neighbors and the supervisors would like it.
I think if the neighbors want it, we would like it.
And as far as the mixture of the evergreens and the non-evergreen trees, I believe this might be the question for the landscape architect, but the testimony is that there would be year-round 100% visual buffer.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, we have 50 feet.
You may want to come to the microphone.
That is correct. We have the 50 feet to work with. So as landscape architects on this project, it's our professional opinion that we would like to mix that evergreen, that mix that 50-foot buffer of landscape. So the evergreens proposed do provide 100% screening, but from an ecological standpoint, from Penn Medicine's point of view, interior to that evergreen screen that's sort of pushed as close to the property boundary as possible, we do have a mix of deciduous shade trees, some larger shrubs, and some understory flowering trees. So that is correct, but the evergreen trees do provide the 100% screening required.
Thank you. Okay. Sitting down the fourth row, I believe.
Good evening. My name is Peter Tubolino, and I'm a resident of Glenmount Farms.
And if you could spell your last name, please.
Tubolino. Okay. Appreciate the opportunity, and wrote a couple of notes here. I have some concerns about several items: security, safety, traffic, and noise and visible obstructions and things. So I'll start with safety. I have a neighborhood watch and a Ring doorbell, and I would say within 5 square miles of where we live, there's been a tremendous amount of foreign people walking around, not foreign in terms of nationality, but just unknown people walking through yards, stealing cars, staking out your house. I think the police officers probably know some of that stuff going on. And when I hear a public access pathway, concerns me. It gives access to the neighborhood. Someone hopping a 6-foot fence, I could do that in a second, right? So to try to propose something constructive as opposed to complaining, I would strongly suggest the security monitoring system, some sort of CCTV monitoring 24/7 on that pathway. I'm sure you have it on your building. But someone's got to watch these pathways and accessibility to this to the closeness of the neighborhood, because they're doing it right now, let alone giving them an opportunity to walk in which will become some sort of park. But 2, 3 in the morning, people are walking driveways, taking cars, and this just gives them an opportunity to do that. So I would strongly suggest the security monitoring 24/7 CCTV system throughout the pathway. And then you could see what's going on and take action. Because by the time you call the police, it's done, right? So that's the first suggestion. Regarding the trees, I was looking at the line of sight and the angle of a 60-foot building, 80-foot building. It may be 4 stories, but you also have a penthouse with mechanical rooms and things on top of that. You have the ability to specify the height of the tree that you plant day one, as opposed to waiting 4 years for the growth of that tree. And I couldn't see from the back, but in your specifications, what's the size of the trees that you're planting day one? Because if you get a foot a year of growth, how long is it going to take to obstruct a 60-foot angle from houses?
Has to be 4 years, so it's gonna be 4 years or less.
Well, what's the size of the tree that you're planting? That's simple. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, let's hear what he has to say. And again, the questions are for us.
Right. Okay, I'm sorry. So anyways, it's obvious you got a plan. I'm just buy bigger trees and start from day one. And then, because 10 years, I'll be dead, 10, 20 years. And even though the operation of the building ceases at 8 o'clock or whatever it was, you're going to have cleaners in there. They're going to be working at night. Each floor is going to have lights on. So it's very important you obstruct that lighting view throughout the night. Now, I live on a 2nd Street. Target has its beepers going, its forklifts going 2, 3, 4 in the morning. I hear about it every night. So I would strongly suggest that whatever you do here, you do over there. because nothing's stopping them from working at night. Thank you for that. And you could deal with standard operating procedures when it comes to when the cleaners can clean and how they do it and when the lights are on. So, Penn has the ability to manage that. I'm real concerned about traffic. I haven't heard anybody tell me here that they did time studies. They actually visited the site to see what's going on, as opposed to maybe some statistic going on in another site. It's very dangerous leaving Glenmont Farms. It's a curve. It's not a straightaway. You can't look and see, a quarter mile down the street and see how much traffic. And people are going, even though I don't know what the speed limit is, 40 miles an hour, they're going 50, 60 miles an hour. By the time they're making that turn, you're sticking your car out, you're getting almost hit. I don't know how many accidents are reported, but I can't tell you how many times I've almost got hit on both sides. All right. So you're not able to really see those opportunities to get in an accident. And when it comes to 10 seconds, time study that, will you please? I sit there sometimes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes trying to get out of there, and then creeping up and seeing another car fly by, and now you're gonna have 400 cars more coming through both ways. I would suggest you put a light there triggered by a motion sensor. Anybody trying to leave that site, if you're trying to get in, you could stop and you could wait and see what's going on. But leaving is extremely dangerous because of the curve of that street. So I wouldn't rely on data from some other location. Do some time studies, stand in that corner, and see throughout the day how challenging it is to leave and how dangerous it is for egress. So I think you need a light. Not stopping traffic, but at least letting someone out, which would stop traffic. And the other question I have is, we built our home, and there was blasting going on. There's a lot of rock, and I don't know if you did some seismic tests or you're going to be doing are there going to be blasting going on, and what precautions do you have here? Because my basement actually cracked because of that. So I'm concerned about blasting. You're going to excavate. You're going down, right? So I'm sure you're taking that into consideration, but precautions have to be made, or there's liability there too, right? So those are my questions. Traffic is probably the most difficult thing. And a security system, you can write in your specifications. That should be easy. If you're concerned about it, I'm sure you are. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present my concerns. Thank you.
So I think the three questions that I would have follow up to that is there any exterior security proposed for the building? Will there be blasting as part of the construction site, if known? And are the trees that are proposed installed in line with the township code requirements?
Those 3 questions answered by 3 different people. Where do we want to start? Height of tree planting? Sure.
Yes, the trees, the evergreen trees proposed meet the minimum height requirements, which is 8 to 10 feet at installation. There is actually a percentage of trees that we are upsizing to 10 to 12 feet at installation. There is the rule of thumb with planting trees, and as it relates to sizes, is there's sort of diminishing returns as you get larger. So that tree has to go through some transplant shock. So if you put a very large tree in, it may take 5 years to even start growing. So we have to sort of balance that out as well. So it's our opinion that the township's minimum requirement of 8 to 10 up to 12 feet, which we're proposing for some of the trees, will then at year 4 reach such a height that and width that it's providing 100% screening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Blasting?
Yes, and again, I think the question is if if it's known whether it needs to be done, and if it does need to be done, what techniques or processes are put in place.
Do we know the answer to any of or all of those questions at this point?
We have done subsurface investigations with test drills throughout the site, and so the building and the parking garage are designed to avoid the rock as much as we can. Of course, when we start digging, you don't know what's under every square inch of dirt. But the idea is to avoid any kind of blasting or really the expense of having to remove rock.
Now, if blasting was required, if it would be required, is that something where notice is provided to the surrounding residents of the time that would be done?
Oh yeah, I'm assuming the township will have ordinances in place that would define how blasting activities could be. So our construction manager would certainly comply with those.
Thank you.
On blasting, if something does happen to someone's basement, how is that dealt with?
I don't know that we have a construction team here to answer that question, and I don't know if it's pertinent necessarily to conditional use, but I can tell you that typically what's done is surveys are done, basements of surrounding properties' basements. They are photographed and documented so that no one can later claim that, look what you did to my basement. It's clear that it was a result of the blasting.
So that would be done before any blasting
Yes, ma'am.
happened? Okay.
Thanks. And then
Misspeak there, did I? Right? Okay.
then just general exterior security for the site. Again, I know that you have facilities elsewhere. Do you have security cameras in place so you know who's coming and going from the property?
There are security cameras that are part of the building design. As Steve put it, they're forensic cameras, meaning that they would be, they would record activities that were happening on site. They aren't necessarily monitored by a police force that would respond to something that's happening in the moment.
But if there was an incident, the police would be able to obtain that video and to review that video.
Oh, certainly.
I believe there was a question as well about the cleaners, about the timing of if people were going to be cleaning in the evening, throughout the night and so forth. Am I right with that?
Yes, and then that might be a question for Ms. Larity if she knows the after-hour operations. We already, my understanding, they are agreeable to a condition to not have loading and unloading and noises associated with that before 7 a.m. But use is different from the actual unloading or loading. Do you anticipate having people there?
Find that at this point, but it's very rare. It's very difficult to hire people to clean in the middle of the night. So typically it would be done just as the building closes. And there are certain sites that get cleaned during the day, especially as we're coming out of COVID. So you have cleaners on site most of the time. And then it's just some of that terminal cleaning that takes place in the early evening.
Thank you. So we're going to proceed down the line. And if we finish that row. What row are we on? Is that row 5? 4? All right.
Hello, Rand Rhodes, R-A-N-D, R-H-O-D-E-S. I live on Quinmont Drive. A couple of questions my wife and I had. We agree with several other people who said the concern about the height of the trees. So please take into account not just getting the minimum, but really coming to our neighborhood and looking at different points around there and seeing what we actually are going to see on a daily basis. Major concern is not only traffic, but you can see Quinmont Drive. If you take a right out there, you have some visibility of the cars coming. If you're taking a left, you can't see 10, 20 feet, to your left. So it's a blind curve. I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 plus years, and it's a crapshoot taking a left out of there. So when you're adding in all these trips and you're also adding people who are leaving appointments late for work, going back to work late, picking up their kids, speeding out of speeding out of that complex rather, going right by our neighborhood. It's really, I would love a traffic light there. Having, we have lots of little kids in the neighborhood. They're going to be getting their driver's licenses and we don't want to wait until we have one or two accidents before somebody acts on this. Also, that second access road that goes behind the complex, we'd be concerned that, if the traffic light at Gateway Center is backed up, that the employees will learn that if they just go around the building and they want to make a right, they could just scoot around the building, zoom right out onto Gwynmont Drive, and that's what, a few feet from the exit to our neighborhood. So we'd be, very concerned about that. So we would like them to restrict access back there. Could they put like a barrier up there or signage or something, or a gate that say it's for deliveries only, it's not for patient use, it's not for employee use, to use as an exit? And that would reduce the amount of people, coming out of that second exit that's closest to our neighborhood. So those are our main concerns. Water. So we have a sump pump. We have a sump pump in our basement. We've had water issues since day one. There's like an underground spring that runs under our neighborhoods. Our sump pump runs even when there's a drought. So there are water issues in our neighborhood historically. So we would like to, the board to take that consideration into account of doing some kind of water studies or evaluating that while the building is going on, that we won't have any water issues. And then after the structure is up, that we won't have any water issues. Thank you.
So, Mr. Potter Joy, your understanding that these stormwater facilities, are they going to assist with the stormwater on the site or benefit the site from its current condition?
Yeah, so in order to do this project, we have to meet the township stormwater management regulations as well as the state's regulations. The township's regulations are pretty stringent. We feel that we will meet or exceed the regulations of the township in regard to runoff rate control, runoff volume control for the development. And there's a lot of nuance involved in that, but we do have a storm report that was submitted with the conditional use application that has been reviewed. There will be further development of that report and further review of that as we go through land development. So I do feel that we will meet the requirements of the township.
Is there a requirement under the Pennsylvania law that the stormwater be actually improved on the site from its current location, from its current stormwater conditions?
Improved is, yes, I guess you could say that. And it's mainly just due to the way that the calculations are done. We do not use the cover conditions that are there necessarily in our pre-development analysis. We have to consider, the area as meadow or as wooded. We don't necessarily get to take credit for any sort of impervious that's there, although this site obviously has minimal at best. So there is a lot of stuff built into that to help drive the site to have a lower runoff after construction.
And would there be stormwater controls in place during the construction process?
Yeah, there are temporary controls in place. On this type of site, it'll be a sediment basin or a sediment trap. As part of our erosion and sediment control design, we will have a sediment basin located at the rear of the property and a sediment trap up near the front, mainly because of the way the topography is and the metrics that are involved in holding and detaining water during construction. Those are primarily geared towards making sure sediment doesn't leave the site, although they do provide essentially a stormwater control measure too, just by nature.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Markham, there are some questions regarding, I guess, site distance. Is that something that you looked at related to your report?
We did not look at the site distance on existing intersections. We did at our proposed driveway, and our proposed driveway has sufficient site distance.
For the proposed driveway?
That's correct.
Thank you. So you can't testify one way or another at this time related to roads that are not, I guess, being used for your site?
No, I showed you the intersections we counted. I can.
But for site
testify.
distance
Site
requirements.
distance, no, I cannot.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, was there any other replies you'd like to make to the?
I don't think so.
I believe the two we've addressed.
Yeah.
All right, so moving forward down the second to last row.
Good evening. I'm Della Payne. I'm also on Trotter Lane, Payne. First of all, I just want to, before I start, I want to extend my thanks to Supervisor Ware. We extended an invitation to the supervisors to come out and actually walk the neighborhood with us. To Mrs. Dorshaw's point, seeing the pictures is one thing, but actually coming and walking the neighborhood and seeing what this monstrosity is going to look like from our backyards and from our front yards, in my case, it is a little different than looking at the picture. So I really thank you for the time that you took to come and walk with a lot of the neighbors. With that being said, we talked a lot about how to mitigate certain, aspects of this and how to make it a little bit more desirable for the neighbors, if desirable is the right word. But I submit that this is an inappropriate use in this neighborhood, 140 feet from some of the property lines. We're single family homes. We have young children in the neighborhood. We have safety concerns. We have privacy concerns. Again, trying to mitigate some of them, I understand, but these are our children and these are our homes. And I again submit, we're not anti-pen, we're anti-pen at this location in a residential neighborhood. Just a couple of things about the, you heard of others, and I think one of our experts in the neighborhood will talk much more than I can eloquently about the safety and the security. But we are concerned about the privacy, and we are concerned about people looking in backyards and windows, etc. We are concerned about the crime that you've already heard about in our neighborhood, people on cams in the middle of the night running through the neighborhood trying to break into cars. We're a neighborhood, I'm not sure if all of you are aware of it or not. We've had one murder in our neighborhood already. It's profoundly affected at least the young adults now. They were children at the time. My daughter being one of them. We've suffered crime in the neighborhood. Having this extra element in the neighborhood is not something that any of us relish at this point in time. In terms of the traffic modeling, I thought what I heard you say was that they modeled the traffic last May. Well, last May, we were still coming out of a pandemic. So I question whether or not that's the right time to model the traffic when many more people are now back to work that were not back to work last May. So what do the numbers look like today, not last May? And, you can look at what Penn did, but we want to know what it looks like for our neighborhood in 2023, not May of 2022 when we were coming out of the pandemic. You've already heard about the blind curve. It's real. You can see it in the picture. It's a danger getting out of the neighborhood. Another question I had was about, we had asked for a line of sight survey. So again, you can see what some of these things look like, but you can't see what it's going to look like from our yards. And we did not get that line of sight survey that we asked for. We're also wondering, to the point when we get to the mitigation, do we have increased lighting within our neighborhood? What other things can we do in the neighborhood to keep us safe? I understand we're going to have less. We don't want to see the lighting from there, but how do we make sure that we don't have people wandering our neighborhood? And do we have anybody that's going to look at what the neighborhood looks like in terms of lighting and safety? I'm also wondering about, I heard that, that there was no drain on resources and that we don't need upgrades to the grid or the sewers. And I'm just wondering whether that's been studied and whether there's evidence that we know that that's not going to be an issue for us. And I think I'm going to let my other neighbors cover the other issues. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Board have any questions? Proceed down the line. Oh, we're gonna go back.
Good evening. I'm Mary Lynn Alvarino from Oval Lane, and I'm going to beat the dead horse of the traffic. From a family where my husband and I both commute between 6:45 and 7:15 in the morning, which will be the prime traffic time for this site, that's going to add 6 to 7 cars per minute by the numbers that you cited, which might not sound like a lot, but coming around the famous blind curve, it actually will be a lot. And if you thought about 6 or 7 cars per minute rolling around your neighborhood, you might think about it differently. So I hope that you would all think about it in that perspective.
Thank you. Proceeding down the second to last row. On the, what is our left side, second to last row. Go back to the last row on the left side. We'll work our way back.
Nice to be on this side of the microphone. Jonathan Casa, Kassa, Gwinnmont Farms. I appreciate all the comments that our neighbors had and agree with just about every issue raised. Appreciate the answers that we've gotten. One of the areas that we want to make sure that is addressed, and you've heard this before from us, is the safety and security issues that have already been brought up. Appreciate the flexibility about the fence and the possibility to raise that to 8 feet. It'll be a good conversation to have with the rest of the community as to what that will look like. Perhaps there's a height in between, but we have to see visually what that means. We did ask in prior meetings about the type of security assessments that this community desperately needs, if you haven't gotten that sense yet. And we talked initially over the township at the rec center about crime prevention through environmental design. Nobody has brought that up still. And it's not a gotcha. It's okay that no one has brought it up. But we did months ago in December. And we still haven't heard. It's the attention to detail that we do care about in this community. Because once again, we're not anti-pen. But if we see that there's some investments in the security plan and the independent objective experts that also have their opinions inform this plan, we'll have more confidence as a community in what you, as our elected representatives, decide for our community and the rest of the township and the communities that surround it. So I ask you to please hold Penn accountable and their experts to listen to us. We're the ones who live here. We're the ones who respectfully ask you to represent us and make sure that these questions are addressed. As an example, that fence could be a very good thing. It's nice to hear about the trees and the landscaping. But if you look at it from they call it CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design, you have to manage the risk just as well of having people be able to climb the trees and easily hop over the fence. You can also, at 3 in the morning, have a lot more opportunity to get over that fence and look at a house that's being cased, or that you're walking by in the middle of the night that we're picking up on our rings. Now, that doesn't mean that we can protect against everything. No one can here. Right? I know that. But what that leads to is one of the questions we'd like you to respectfully request that the board hold Penn accountable to look into the security systems that have been asked for. This is an area of my expertise. And there's a way to not just have a reactive forensic camera system. You can have a proactive, which is right now cutting edge, and it's not going to bleed Penn Medicine of any of their budget at all. When you can have virtual fencing in place, you can have remote video analytics that can have the right scripts depending on what may be realized. You can tell the difference between a fox running by and someone trying to hop a fence. That's a type of security and comfort that isn't outrageous to ask for. It's the same type of things that your school district is asking for and looking into to protect those students, staff, and faculty. It's something we'd like to hear more about from Penn. If you can have a covenant when it comes down to protecting the fences and the trees, you can have a covenant for making sure that that type of security and the physical access is addressed. Which leads me to the other point. You will vastly reduce the risk to our community to this type of crime if you reduce the access to cars and vehicles. Is what from what we heard tonight, it's essentially public access. We know that it might be private, but cars can come in on a Sunday, park there, do whatever they need to do. We need to have that addressed. What type of closure to that facility can occur after hours so that we once again create another layer of security? This is about having multiple layers and a holistic, proactive approach. This can be done. This is Penn Medicine, one of the most world-renowned campus public safety departments exists with the University of Pennsylvania. And I know that you can not only afford, but access that expertise. And we would be very grateful if you applied that for our community. The traffic safety you already heard about. I've been in this community over 20 years. I've been in Gwynmont Farms nearly a decade. I've never seen a patrol car pulling someone over anywhere in that stretch between Knapp Road and Route 63. It's not about the traffic and the cars stacking up. It's about the cars whipping around and creating a very dangerous situation. So to that point about the light, it would be great if we could have that study done, but also to make sure it's not like the Gateway Center light at Rite Aid, where if I get stuck there, I could walk home quicker than when I'm sitting at that light. So we know that that conversation will occur, and we appreciate that. To finish, I think one of the most, it can't go without being noted that during this public hearing, there was a comment to list from Penn's lawyer, I believe, all the other uses that could go into into that site. And we understand that. I feel it's disingenuous, and it's just me speaking as a constituent, not even for the rest of the community. But it's like, oh, nice neighborhood you got there. Shame that something would happen to it. I don't appreciate that type of line of questioning and how that was brought up. We are not anti-Penn. This is a facility that would mean a lot to our community as a whole. What we're looking for is to have a proactive board of supervisors who asks the questions and holds Penn accountable for our concerns now, sooner than later, so that we can all enjoy what benefits there are from this facility for the community while knowing that our families are safe. Thank you very much.
Proceeding down the last row.
Good evening. My name is Matt Nye. I live on Gwynmont Drive, NYE. One of the questions I have is, I don't know if any of you have driven from Knapp Road to Main Street on DeKalb Pike there. And if you know, and you have, then you know it's not flat like their misrepresentation of their site survey showed. That the property on the edge of Gwynmont Farms and their property was on a completely flat level. And if you ever drive that, and I ask you to drive it as soon as you can, you'll see it's not the way it is. It grades up, just like everyone was saying, it turns around, but it also grades up higher. So no matter what that site study showed of how it's going to, there's not going to be any shadow, that's completely inaccurate. Whether it was intentionally misleading or not, I don't know. I can't speak for their architect, but it will cast a shadow over our development, no matter what that site study shows. So whenever you get a chance, I ask you to take a drive from Knapp Road to the Wawa, go grab a cup of coffee, and on your way up, see how much that grades up, especially when you get past Gwynmont Farms. And they're right, coming out of there, making a left-hand turn, it's not a matter of if it'll happen, it's a matter of when it will happen. I was following my daughter's school bus out of there last week at 10 to 9 in the morning. The bus made a right-hand turn, took them about 3 minutes to get out on the DeKalb Pike. 2 cars came flying around DeKalb. They weren't doing 40 or even 45, swerved around the bus, and then flew down the street. Then when the bus got over DeKalb Pike, 3 cars coming this way blew through the bus's stop sign. So unless you're going to increase patrol to stop people rushing to their appointments or rushing out of their appointments, like everyone said, you're just putting more people at risk with this. And, someone asked about the safety of what's stopping people from being back there in that property. And you're correct, nothing, absolutely nothing. But there is a lot of nice shrubbery and things like that that's hiding. And while I agree closed circuit TVs would be nice, it's not going to stop anybody from doing what they need to do. Just last night, I was standing in a neighbor's driveway who recently had somebody in his driveway at nighttime. He said the light went off, the spotlight went off, the Ring camera went on, even made a noise. He said the guy didn't even flinch. Stood there and still continued to try to get into his car for several minutes. So obviously either they don't care or they're reckless enough not to worry about who catches them. So I would definitely think that, more like along the lines of the last gentleman said, my neighbor said, that there needs to be more serious security if this is going to go through, even 24-hour on-site security. Because I have 3 kids, 7, 4, and 2 years old. A lot of kids in that neighborhood. They play outside. We have food drives in the winter where Christmas where we donate to Manna. We have Easter egg hunts. We have Halloween parties. The kids roam this neighborhood. It's a very close-knit neighborhood. And like everyone said, we're not anti-pen. But I mean, if the compromise is there, instead of 4 stories, 2 stories. And instead of 12 services offered, 4 services offered. Where is the compromise there? And I think of all the other open areas in the area. I mean, Montgomeryville Mall is bankrupt. It's a nice big property for Penn to be at. But, we asked for the crime study, we didn't get it. We asked for a lot of things, we didn't get it. And the reason is because they've never abutted one of their facilities up to a residential area. And, there's a lot of people in here, like you said, we're not anti-pen, but this in our backyards, despite what some of the surveys show, is not the true representation. So, for people who came out, thank you to see the neighborhood. And I ask you all, take a drive down there and really see what it's going to look like with a 4-story building at the highest peak of DeKalb Pike. And if you wouldn't put a walking path through your neighborhood, don't put one through ours, please. Thank you.
Proceeding down the last row.
Good evening. My name is Richard Fosco, Fosco, and I live on Gwynmont Drive for the last 36 years. I posed a question at the last planning board meeting and nobody had an answer for. I think one of the supervisors was here. I forget which one. And I'm wondering if there's an answer tonight. What percentage of the commercial property in Montgomery Township is currently vacant? Anybody have the answer to that question? I would suggest to you that it's relatively high when you look at what's going on in the Montgomeryville Mall and you look at what's going on down at the Giant. And the next follow-up question to that would be, has Penn Medicine built a facility like this in this proximity to a neighborhood of single-family homes anywhere else? So that would be my second question. Third concern is you as representatives of us as your constituents and the planning board is the people who are supposed to be looking out for how our township is developed and looked. How can you do this? What is the percentage of open space north of 63 compared to the amount of residential space and commercial space? Take that number and compare it to what you have south of 463. And I think you're going to see that we're pretty set upon in our little corner of Montgomery Township. Once you get north of 463, there's parks all over the place and single family homes, 1.5 acre lots, 2 acre lots. You get south and you have our little neighborhood. You have nothing but commercial construction, commercial zone. So as a percentage of the space of the commercial property in this neighborhood, in this township, it pretty much is where we live. So all of you that live north of 463, beautiful. Where we live, let's build a 4-story building that's going to overlook your neighborhood and bring all kinds of traffic to you. So you're the commissioners and the planning board. You would think you would have thought of this and said, How appropriate is this to set upon these 100 people who are our constituents to have this built there? So I would think you should think about that before you even approve this, let alone talk about how to mitigate it. And I do appreciate, Miss Ware, you coming out to actually look, because you actually walked across the top of that berm with us. And if you remember, when we went down Trotter Lane, that berm decreases as you get to where Glenmont Drive ends, to where there's no berm at all. So what's going to happen there? That's going to be directly adjacent to the Penn Medicine property, and there's no berm at all when you get down that far, and then it grades up. So you're not talking about 8 foot, 10 foot, you're talking about no feet there, none, 0. And then how far set back is this from the berm where the parking garage is going to be? When we were here last, they said, well, there won't be any blasting because we're going to build it into the landscaping. Well, you can't build it into the landscape because there's no landscaping to build it into. Anyone in our neighborhood who has planted a garden, dug a hole, knows that there's solid rock everywhere underneath. I don't care how many drillings they did, and I don't know how many they did. Did you ever ask them how many drillings they did to find out if there's solid rock, where they're going to try to put this, or how deep they'd have to go to meet the height requirements that we have as a township regulation for how high that parking garage is going to be? How deep are they going to have to go? Does anybody know the answer to that question? How far subterranean will the bottom floor of that garage have to be? And do you really think that they did adequate studies to find out that they won't have to blast? And we all have solid concrete basements. And there is a stream that runs underneath our neighborhood. I also have a water problem. So once there's blasting, all bets are off. Solid concrete walls can crack. That stream can change direction. And that's underground. We're not talking about runoff. We're talking about underground where the blasting would be. And I can tell you that whatever traffic study was presented here tonight was totally inadequate. Totally inadequate. The point about when the pandemic ended and how the traffic was building ever since then, when the traffic study was done, bad news. Never doing a traffic count to see how it's going to affect us exiting and entering our neighborhood. Why not? Who's it going to affect more than anyone else? And where would the impact be the most dangerous? Not even a measurement to see the sight lines. And you heard enough testimony. I won't go on and on about that it is dangerous to pull out of there, and to add the number of cars, that are already coming around those corners will make it just more dangerous. So I would hope to get an answer to the question about the commercial property that is unoccupied in our township from someone, sometime, please. And thank you for listening.
Thank you. Anyone else in the back row? Okay, so we're going to the gentleman who, what's the word?
So anybody want to try to answer any of those questions? Like have them answer?
No, so this isn't a question and answer session.
But you had people who came before you who had questions.
But that's related to the site itself instead of the township. I'm sure that Mr. Curie, the manager, will be happy to discuss after she talks with zoning and planning related to any information related to vacant commercial properties within the township.
But that wasn't the only question about the blasting. It was about the traffic study. It was about why wasn't that done? You have a traffic guy here. You have a site guy here.
I believe we've addressed some of those questions on previous comments.
Good evening. My name is Vince Tulio. I live at Glasgow Circle. I've been at every township supervisor meeting in the last 3 years, except I believe 2. I've been at several planning commissions. I've watched this entire concept come through. These are my personal questions, or just statement and my belief. I'm for the project. I think it'd be a plus for Montgomery Township, but there are several issues, and I'm just going to put it out there. They're not going to have their own police force. They're not going to have their own fire department. I've been at every budget meeting. every time, taxes had to go up because the township residents pay taxes. Unfortunately, this project, after it's built, won't pay any taxes. I'm a contractor by trade. This is me making a statement. Make sure you hire a large enough contractor. There's no blasting. He can use rock hammers. That'll alleviate a lot of problems. Back to what I was stating, I'm sure the chief, if this project goes through, is going to have extra patrol cars circling this compound at the cost of all the other taxpayers. So just on rough numbers, at $300 a square foot, this is a $54 million project to build without the parking garage. That's a large takeaway from our tax base. I'd like the township supervisors to consider all that when we all pay our real estate taxes. I don't think you live in the township, counselor, but we all live in the township. We pay taxes here. And I'm hoping that Penn Medicine will realize this is going to be a 50 or 75-year building. They're going to have to be good and or great neighbors if this thing gets approved with everybody that lives in the area. We don't live that far from there. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'll turn it back to the board to see if the board has any final questions before we adjourn.
I have a question. I don't really know who can answer this, but traffic light has been brought up and brought up and brought up. It doesn't seem like a bad idea. What has to happen? Is that a PennDOT thing? Who can tell me? Damon, can you maybe speak to what we would have to do to get a traffic light at their neighborhood?
There's traffic volume you have to be coming in and out of Vermont Drive, and also depends on the volume on Del Pike. There's certain, once you meet the volume criteria, then you can warn traffic lights. We can take a quick look at their study, but I think we did look at that and it did not warrant a traffic light at that intersection. Well, we look at that, but I recall that was the verdict there.
Right, because this isn't causing increased trips into the neighborhood, but it will cause more traffic on DeKalb. Could that change our potential availability of getting a traffic signal?
It can, but it will still depend on the amount of traffic that's coming out of Vermont Drive.
Does safety play into that at all? Because it's a bad curve there. It's very
Safety
bad.
does play into it. Again, that's something we can take a look at. So,
Are there additional traffic calming approaches that we could take that would slow the traffic down? Because speeding was mentioned on several occasions as well on DeKalb Pike.
if I recall from the study, there was a speed study that was done along DeKalb Pike and fell within like 5 miles per hour of the posted speed limit, which is I believe 40 miles per hour.
Well, with the increased traffic that is anticipated with this, would it warrant maybe revisiting whether or not traffic calming techniques could also be employed here if we don't qualify for a signal there?
I'm trying to think of what traffic calming techniques we could do.
A flashing light, it's a curve.
Flashing light may be a possibility of that intersection. I believe there are currently there are signs out there of the curve of the intersection. I'm not sure what else besides maybe a flashing beacon also warn you that could be done.
I'd love to see some kind of creative help with that.
You can definitely look into that.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the board? From the board?
One other comment was about the berm, which may have
different levels.
Yeah, it may have different levels throughout the area. So making the assumption that the berm is the same, if there are lower levels and it's is that something that could be built up again or taken into consideration for areas as those do vary? And that could have been due to erosion or something like that, which I understand can happen over time. But let's look at, if there is a variation, how can that be corrected?
As it relates to the existing berm, I believe where it tapers down to no longer be a berm is where Gwynmont Drive dead ends at our site. And there is existing trees in there. So if we wanted to build that berm up, we would be losing the trees. So it's sort of a balance that we have to take there. But even in that area, regardless of the berm or not, we are providing the required landscaping and the fence.
Any other questions from the board?
We received Exhibit 8 here, the Transportation Impact Study. Have our experts received this and or reviewed it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we're going to close the record. Mr. Davis, no other exhibits, no other witnesses. So again, we'll close the record. At this time, before we adjourn the hearing, I'd make a recommendation that this board take the time to deliberate on this hearing. This board has 45 days from the closing of this hearing in order to make a decision. You are able to meet to discuss an executive session as a quasi-judicial deliberation as such. If this board is inclined to grant this application, additional conditions could be imposed that would give additional time for the board to maybe discuss some additional conditions, maybe discuss any of those conditions with the applicant. Again, if this board was so deemed to approve this application. So all that being said, I'd recommend to this board that this hearing be adjourned for today, and then the decision on this application be made at the next board supervisors meeting for that time to deliberate in between.
I like that idea. I like to give us some more time to get some further questions answered.
And to come up with some of those conditions that we can impose at this time, I think will be important as well.
So with that, yes. Yes, we are closing the hearing. We are not going to be taking any additional testimony. We're not going to be taking any additional public comment for purposes of the hearing. What we'll do is we're going to adjourn the hearing, and we're going to have a determination or a decision on this conditional use application. I believe at the next board supervisors meeting, which would be the first meeting on April 10th here at this room at the regularly scheduled meeting. With that, we will adjourn this closed hearing. We'll adjourn the hearing, and we'll adjourn back into the public meeting for this board to take action at the next meeting on this application. Perhaps you'd like to give a brief moment of time to see if anyone would like to exit before we proceed with business.
Absolutely.
But there won't be a determination then on this application tonight. We will adjourn back into the public meeting.
Thank you all for coming. We took very serious notes, and we will do some more talking about this.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
I know. Seriously.
All right, I think we can get started again. Going into planning and zoning, number 8, review of zoning hearing board applications. Mary Ann McConnell.
We have one application scheduled for the zoning hearing board on April 5th, 2023. J.P. Morgan Chase Bank, 773 Bethlehem Heights. The applicant proposes to redevelop the property, including demolition of the existing car park and construction of the approximate 3,400 square foot freestanding bank with accessory drive-up ATM and other associated site improvements. Property sits in the commercial district at the corner of North Wales Road and Bethlehem Pike. They are seeking a variance from the provisions of Section 23078A of the Code of Montgomery Township in order to reduce the required 20-foot landscape buffer required along street frontages and side and rear boundary lines. So the board could either take a neutral position or ask the solicitor to be present at the zoning hearing board, or let the zoning hearing board decide the matter.
I think the zoning hearing board can take this one. Does everyone agree?
Agree.
Agree. Okay. You also have a waiver of land development application for FEI Realty.
Yes, we do have the applicant here tonight, the engineer, Mr. Brensinger, and the applicant of FEI Realty Holdings. If you have any questions for them, they propose to construct a new 768 square foot pole barn on an existing gravel lot in the rear corner of the property located at 650 Upper State Road. The property sits in the limited industrial zoning district with the ECPOD overlay. The proposed pole barn is utilized to provide indoor storage of their equipment for their existing business on the site. The structure complies with all zoning requirements, and it's less than 1,000 square feet on existing impervious surface. No stormwater management is required, and review letters from the engineer and public safety staff are included in your packet.
Does anybody have any questions?
So does the location that you're going to be putting it on have to be excavated at all? Any other preparation? Nothing.
Level of pad with crushed stone. There's existing crushed stone with a little bit of grade, still come more loaded stone. So just level off so that the building's built at a level grade, then the stone will slip off. So the only excavation that's required is auger holes for the holes for the structures out.
What's the existing business there?
Construction manager.
So you're gonna just be storing construction equipment in this pole barn?
We usually don't put much in there anyway if we have it on site, but just some material and some equipment, some scaffold.
Okay. Everyone okay with this? If so, we'll go ahead and, okay. I'm gonna move to approve resolution 2023-05, granting a waiver of the requirement of a formal land development application for FEI Realty Holdings 2 LLC at 650 Upper State Road for the construction of a 768 square foot pole barn as per the attached.
Second.
Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you for sitting here for all these hours. Moving on to Public Works. We've got number 10, award the bid for rectangular rapid flashing beacons project. Greg? Carolyn?
Good evening. At your public meeting on February 13th, you authorized the township to bid for the installation of the RRFBs to be located at the entrance to Wendell Strait Park and one also at the entrance of Spring Valley Park. Last year, as part of our budget, we included $492,144, of which $271,072 is a grant which we received from the County Transportation Program. So tonight, I'm proud to say that we actually got 3 bids. The lowest responsible bidder was Armor, And we are asking the board to consider awarding that bid tonight so that we can get this project underway for the safety of the pedestrians who access those parks. Armor was the lowest responsible bidder in the amount of $484,017, and it has been reviewed by Gilmore and Associates, our township traffic engineer.
Great. Everyone okay with this? All right. I'm going to move to award the bid for the installation of rectangular rapid flashing beacons and pedestrian improvements at the entrance to Spring Valley and Windlestray Parks to Armor and Sons Electric, Inc., the lowest responsible bidder, in the amount of $484,017 per the recommendation of Gilmore and Associates, Township Traffic Engineer.
Second.
Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Reef, next one about some new trash recycling cans.
Okay, good evening. In 2023, the Public Works Department is scheduled to purchase 3 trash recycling cans. The trash recycling cans will match the ones purchased last year in the testing phase, placed at the rear of the police department building in Friendship Park. 1 will be placed out front of the administration building, and 2 will be placed in the newly remodeled Fellowship Park, hopefully this year, next year timeframe. This purchase was approved in the 2023 capital investment plan. Attached is a quote dated March 15th, 2023 from Kirby Built to provide the requested trash recycling cans at a total cost of $5,658.26. The equipment quoted meets the specifications prepared by the department. A total of $6,000 was included in the 2023 capital investment plan for the purchase of the 3 trash recycling cans. So it would be our recommendation that the Board of Supervisors approve the purchase of the 3 trash recycling cans from Kirby Built for a total cost of $5,658.26 per the capital investment plan.
These things are pretty expensive. Are we expecting them to last a long time?
That's our hope, yes. They're made out of recycled material, and the cans that we have out there just don't hold up as well as what these have been. The one that we placed has been holding up very well.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
Make sure you get them ordered. The price quote's locked in for 30 days from March 7th.
Yes. And they're available.
Wow, that's a miracle.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to move to approve the purchase of 3 trash recycling cans from Kirby Built for a total cost of $5,658.26 per the quote dated March 15th, 2023.
Second.
Any public comment? No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
So much. Going into public safety, number 12, accepting our FEMA Safer Grant for FDMT.
Thank you. The fire department was notified on March 15th that the department's application for FEMA fiscal year 2021 Safer Grant funding opportunity was approved in the amount of $193,000. This federal grant awarded to the FDMT to assist with the recruitment and retaining of volunteers. The department's grant writer submitted the grant application for paid for call, national training certification, grant administration fees, and the marketing for recruitment of volunteers. The period of grant performance is from June 7th, 2023 to June 6th, 2027. This is a 4-year grant to assist with the recruiting and retention of volunteer emergency responders. This will obviously have a positive impact on the fire department of Montgomery Township in the amount of $193,000. And I'm recommending tonight, the staff is recommending tonight, that the Board of Supervisors approve and approve the ability for the FDMT to accept and execute the Safer Grant.
That is wonderful. Of course, we'll approve that.
Thank you.
I'm going to move to approve the FDMT to accept the 2021 FEMA Safer Grant in the amount of $193,000.
Second.
Public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Go get it. You've got, no, this one is Chief Bendig, new police station renovation.
Yes, good evening. To accommodate the need for more functional operating space, the police department proposes renovating several areas of the police station. These renovations consist of the following: combining 2 small interview rooms into 1 more functional interview room, construction of a dividing wall in the men's locker room, and also the replacement of a pass-through window in the communications center. Attaches a March 9th quote from the building renovations and supplies from Neeson Renovations of Montgomery Township, the lowest of 3 quotes received to provide the requested services for a total cost of $8,400. A total of $106,000 was included in the approved capital budget under buildings and grounds. This funding is been allocated for these renovations as well as other forthcoming renovation projects to include the locker room replacements of the lockers in the locker rooms, as well as the flooring in the locker room area later this calendar year. It is recommended the board authorize the renovation services at total cost of $8,400.
Everyone good with this? I'm going to move to award the contract for the police station renovations to Neeson Renovations at a total cost of $8,400 per their quote dated March 9th, 2023.
Second.
Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Going into Parks and Rec. Item number 14, the spring and summer recreation programs and fee schedule. Floyd.
It is that time of year again. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm actually filling in for your program director, who is perhaps the most eager person I've ever seen with programs. And she has a lot of ideas. Most of them are tremendous. So I'm going to start by saying I will be very honest with you. I sent her home. She was there all day today, so I figured I'd do this tonight.
That was nice of you.
Attaches the proposed lineup of activities at the Montgomery Township Community and Recreation Center for the spring and summer 2023. The recommended fees and charges for each program are also included. The schedule will be valid from April 8th, 2023 to September 4th or Labor Day. All all community center activities and events will be run through our normal publicity channels as well as social media. The diverse lineup of activities, programs, and special events provides a diverse menu of recreational opportunities, a wide array of healthy fitness sessions, fun community special events, and positive educational programs will be available for individuals of all ages and abilities in Montgomery Township. Recommendation for the spring and summer recreation programs and fees amendment is to be submitted. Staff is recommending it.
And if I could interject, I met with Angelina on Friday. She was trying to get us a spreadsheet, and Deb was out of the office today, so it's the updated one is not in your packet, but there were some additional ones that we're adding.
I have it right here. And
do you want me to read them, or do you want to read them?
Well, it doesn't matter. You can go ahead.
Oh, gee, thanks.
Don't fight.
So we have muffins with mom scheduled for May 15th at no cost. Donuts with dad scheduled for May 15th. Earth Day Explorers scheduled for April 21st. Montgomery's Got Talent, which is auditions on May 23rd or 24th. And then the show is Wednesday, July 26th. We have teen basketball tournament 5v5 at a cost of $25. We have an adult pottery class at a cost of $130 for residents and $135 for non-residents. And finally, what Angelina is most excited about and most proud of is introducing a program called We Do It Different, which is a program for children and adults with special needs that she is still working on. The idea being, especially for children, they would come with their one-on-one caregiver and be able to participate 1 hour a week, art 1 week, some type of physical activity the next week to their ability. But I was thrilled, to hear that she wanted to do this. And I told her we would support her in any way we could, not speaking for the board, but you did. It's fine.
I can't wait to take that back to the Parks Board and let Kim Green know. This is one of those programs that she's been dying to see us offer. And so that's wonderful news.
And technology is great. But the staff at the rec center, they were extremely busy today because Kids U Registration started and ended today. And so to remind her to get me an updated spreadsheet just seemed cruel and unusual punishment after taking all the phone calls they did over there.
It actually started and ended in 4 minutes.
4 minutes?
That's how long it took to register.
Like a Taylor Swift concert.
It was probably quicker, I think. I'm not sure.
Wow. Carolyn, if I could have some information about that, I would love to showcase that at our event on Saturday.
She doesn't have anything yet. She's still in the planning stages, but I wanted to make sure that you were aware of it and gave the green light so she could keep moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Wow, that's great. All right. Move to approve the 2023 Spring Summer Recreation Program and fee schedule amendment as submitted.
Second.
Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Do we have any old business? Moving to new business. Department reports. Chief Wegman will update the board on the township's ISO rating.
Last spring, we went through an ISO assessment. This happens every 5 years. Our ratings are usually around a 3 and a 4. ISO ratings help insurance companies determine premiums and those types of things for homeowners and residents. And I'm very happy to report that we've once again lowered our ISO rating to a 2. The best you can get is a 1. So some of the things we have no control over, water pressure that comes from North Wales Water Authority, how many gallons per minute. Emergency communications comes from our emergency communication center. But under the fire department, we had a lot of growth in terms of our rating. They look at our training, our community risk reduction activities, our staffing levels, our response times. So we just barely made a 2, I think by like point something, but it gave us really good direction of where we need to be at a 1. So we'll do our best to get to a 1 in the next 5 years. But it's really exciting. We've never been a 2 before. There's not a lot of municipalities that are 2s. Norristown is celebrating as well. They got a 2, which was big for them. So it really speaks volumes to what the staff's doing up at fire services as far as training and community risk reduction activities.
Are those ratings posted anywhere?
I posted it on our Facebook page, maybe during when Penn was presenting. No, I'm just kidding. We'll post it. I think it's already up. I think somebody already did it, but they did all of Montgomery County. They did, and they didn't send a lot of us our ratings. So Norristown got their rating right away, and I had to reach back and ask them like, "Hey, when are we getting our final report?" So we are going to put something up on the fire department Facebook page.
Does that number have anything to do with what residents pay for their insurance?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Great. So
a lower rating is good for our residents. It means that they have a fire department that meets all national training standards, exceeds community risk reduction activities. And again, some of the things we don't have control over, like we have really good water pressure. That's a plus. We have a great communication center. But the things that we could directly control, we did really well with.
that is amazing. I'm sorry the audience is not full anymore, but thank you for coming and turning that department around and doing what you have done over there, because it's pretty amazing.
Well, thank you.
So
I like working here. Please keep me.
thank you. That's really great.
Yeah.
Any other department reports? Anything anybody else wants to talk about before we go to committee liaison reports? Everybody just wants to go home. Okay. Committee liaison reports. We did not have a planning commission, so I have nothing to report. Do you have anything?
I'll just bring to light the one of the things that's in the report about the engineering firm that actually came to the rec center to start with that feasibility study. So we haven't gotten into it yet, but it is part of what is going on at the rec center. So
Okay. Thank you.
Let's see. We had sewer authority. There's a lot of work being done on Basin B, which it would be very boring to try to describe.
Thanks.
But Shannon is I love her so much because she's so excited about it. And but you got to love those kind of infrastructure improvements, and I just feel very happy that she's in charge of that, and she's really doing a great job. They're celebrating their 60th anniversary of the sewer authority this year, so it's a real milestone celebration for them, and that was one of the topics of conversation is how they would celebrate their 60th. So no formal plans yet, but you know they're brainstorming on it. Some kind of party. I'll let you know what kind of party it's going to be. Yeah, I'm not going to go there. So I'm a little punchy because I'm tired, and I'll just say, oh, we had Shade Tree Commission as well, and Mary Ann presented some updates on our signs that are going to be going out, and where are we at with the bidding on that? We haven't.
Yeah, I think we're just presenting it to the board.
Yeah,
For the opinion before we go out for quotes.
Okay, so at a future meeting in the not too distant future, we'll come back to the board with a presentation on it. But it's really come together nicely. I think you guys will be happy with the package that's being presented.
Great. For the Environmental Advisory Committee, we have our plastic bag, or single-use plastic, I should say, survey. The single-use plastic survey will be concluded the end of this month, the 31st. We have a meeting tomorrow. We'll be looking at some of the preliminary comments are the most interesting part of any survey. But we'll be reporting back on at the next meeting with that survey, the survey results.
Great.
And we had, with the senior committee, we had one of our Medicare workshops. And so it's my understanding prior to COVID, when they've done this, they had like maybe less than 10 people that showed. We had 32 people that came.
Oh, that's amazing.
So it really, the word got out, which was good. And we have another one coming up in April.
Great.
All right, would seem like that's enough for everyone tonight. It's 10 o'clock. I'm going to move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Good night.
I know. I was waiting for some. I was thinking we could have a poop party.
Mhm.
I'm like, no.